Hey, I'm Alex, and welcome to Hallucination. If you love true horror stories, consider subscribing. It really helps the channel grow. The stories you'll hear are shared by our audience from Reddit, and to keep their original essence, I read them exactly as they were written. Before we begin, let me know in the comments, where in the world are you listening from? Also, check the timestamps in the comments for story titles and easy navigation. Now, let's dive into the darkness. The crackling of twigs under my boots was the only sound breaking the eerie silence of the forest. I had always loved solo camping trips, but something about this one felt different. I shook off the feeling, attributing it to too many hours alone with my thoughts. That's when I saw him. Beautiful evening for a hike, isn't it? The man's voice startled me, seemingly materializing out of nowhere. He was tall and lean, with a weathered face that spoke of years spent outdoors. His smile was friendly, but something in his eyes made my skin prickle. "Yeah, it is," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm just looking for a good spot to set up camp for the night." "Why don't I show you?" "Well, you're in luck," he exclaimed, his enthusiasm a bit too forced. "I know the perfect clearing just up ahead." Every instinct told me to politely decline and move on, but the sun was sinking fast, and I was tired. Against my better judgment, I nodded and followed him down the narrow trail. As we walked, he chatted amiably about the area, pointing out various plants and rock formations. His knowledge was impressive, and I found myself relaxing slightly. Maybe I had misjudged him. "So what brings you out here all alone?" he asked, glancing back at me with that unsettling smile. "We just needed to clear my head," I said, keeping my answer vague. "Sometimes the city gets too loud, you know? That's why I never leave these woods." He nodded sagely. "Oh, I know exactly what you mean. They have a way of keeping you." The way he said it sent a chill down my spine, but before I could dwell on it, we emerged into a small clearing. "Thanks," I said, shrugging off my backpack. "This is great." It was perfect for camping, with a flat area for my tent and a natural fire pit ringed with stones. "I appreciate the help." "Oh, it's my pleasure," he replied, making no move to leave. "In fact, why don't I help you set up camp?" I hesitated, not wanting to offend him, but also not comfortable with the idea of him staying. "That's okay, I can manage. It'll be dark soon, and 4 hands are better than 2. I'm sure you have your own camp to get back to." He waved his hand dismissively. "Nonsense. I'm in no rush. Besides, it's not safe for someone to be out here alone. You never know what kind of creatures might be lurking in the dark." The emphasis he placed on the creatures made my heart rate spike. I forced a smile and started unpacking my tent, hoping that if I got set up quickly, he'd leave. As we worked, the stranger's behavior became increasingly odd. He'd ask personal questions, then change the subject abruptly when I deflected. His eyes would dart to the woods surrounding us, as if watching for something, and more. Then once, I caught him staring at me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. The sun had fully set by the time we finished, the clearing now bathed in silvery moonlight. I stood back, admiring my cozy setup, when I felt a hand on my shoulder. I jumped, spinning around to find the stranger mere inches from my face. "You've done well," he said, his voice low and gravely. "But there's still so much to do before the night is through." I took a step back, my heart pounding. "Thanks for your help, but I think I'm good now." He tilted his head, reminding me unnervingly of a predator sizing up its prey. "You should probably head back to your own camp before it gets too late." "Oh, but I'm exactly where I need to be. You see, these woods, they get hungry sometimes, and it's been so long since we've had a visitor." My blood ran cold as the implications of his words sank in. I glanced at my tent, calculating the odds of reaching my phone before he could stop me. As if reading my thoughts, he stepped between me and the tent. "Now let's not do anything rash. The night is young, and we have so much to discuss. Look, I don't want any trouble." I backed away slowly, my mind racing for a way out of this nightmare. "Why don't we just go our separate ways?" He laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the trees. "But trouble has already found you, my dear. Easily. The moment you stepped into these woods, you became part of them, and they didn't let go." I turned to run, but he was faster than I expected. His hand clamped around my wrist, yanking me back with surprising strength. I stumbled, falling hard onto the forest floor. "Please," I gasped, struggling to free myself from his grip. Just let me go. I won't tell anyone about this. I swear. His eyes glittered in the moonlight, a manic glee spreading across his face. Oh, but that's not how this works. You see, the forest chose you, and now you'll never leave. As he spoke, I became aware of movement in the surrounding woods. Shadows seemed to shift and swirl, taking on vaguely human shapes. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but I forced it down. I had to think, and had to find a way out. My free hand groped the ground, searching for anything I could use as a weapon. My fingers closed around a hefty branch, and without hesitation, I swung it with all my might. The impact caught him off guard, and his grip loosened just enough for me to wrench free. I scrambled to my feet and ran, not caring about direction or path, just needing to put distance between us. Branches whipped at my face as I tore through the underbrush, the stranger's enraged howls echoing behind me. I ran until my lungs burned, and my legs threatened to give out. The forest seemed to come alive around me, trees creaking and groaning as if trying to block my escape. Only then did I dare to slow down and take stock of my surroundings. The clearing and my campsite were long gone, replaced by dense, unfamiliar woods. The moonlight barely penetrated the thick canopy, leaving me in near total darkness. Leaning against a tree, I tried to calm my ragged breathing and racing heart. A twig snapped nearby and I froze, straining my ears. I needed to think, to come up with a plan, but the forest felt oppressive, closing in around me with malevolent intent. I could make out the faint sound of footsteps, slowly and methodically searching the area. I know you're out there, the stranger's voice called out, eerily calm now. You can run all night if you like, but these woods, they always lead back to me in the end. I bent back a whimper, pressing myself against the rough bark of the tree. My mind raced through options, each one seeming more hopeless than the last. I had no idea which direction would lead me out of the forest, and my phone was still in my backpack back at the campsite. The footsteps grew closer, accompanied by the stranger's soft, unsettling humming. I held my breath, praying he would pass by without noticing me. Suddenly, a hand clamped over my mouth, muffling my scream. I thrashed wildly, but whoever held me was strong. Shh. A voice hissed in my ear. I'm trying to help you. I froze, confusion mixing with fear. It wasn't a stranger's voice, but that of a woman. Slowly, she removed her hand from my mouth. Who are you? I whispered, my voice trembling. Someone who knows what he is, she replied softly. And how to stop him. But we have to move quickly and quietly. Can you do that? I nodded, not trusting my voice. The woman took my hand and led me deeper into the woods, moving with a surety that spoke of intimate familiarity with the terrain. We walked for what felt like hours, the woman occasionally pausing to listen or change direction. Just when I thought I couldn't take another step, we emerged into another clearing. This one was different, though. Symbols were carved into the trees surrounding it, and in the center stood a large, flat, what is this place? Stone covered in strange markings. I asked, my exhaustion momentarily forgotten. The woman's face was grim in the moonlight, the heart of the forest and the source of his power. She quickly explained how the stranger was bound to the forest, drawing strength from it is to lure and trap unsuspecting hikers. But the bond worked both ways, and if we could sever it, we might have a chance to escape. As she spoke, a bone-chilling howl echoed through the trees. He had found our trail. We're out of time, the woman said, her voice tight with urgency. Whatever happens, don't let him touch the stone. The clearing erupted into chaos as the stranger burst through the tree line, his face contorted with rage. He lunged for the stone, but the woman intercepted him, grappling fiercely. I stood frozen for a moment, overwhelmed by the surreal scene before me, but as the stranger began to overpower the woman, I knew I had to act. Spotting a sharp rock near my feet, I scooped it up and charged forward. With all my strength, I brought it down on the strange symbols carved into the stone. The effect was immediate and terrifying. A deafening crack split the air, and the ground beneath our feet began to tremble. The stranger let out an inhuman shriek, his body contorting as if being torn apart from the inside. Run? The woman shouted, grabbing my arm and pulling me towards the trees. We ran blindly through the woods, the earth shaking violently beneath us. Trees groaned and toppled around us, and I was certain we would be crushed at any moment. Just when I thought we couldn't go on, We burst out of the tree line onto a paved road. As we climbed into the car, I looked back at the forest. The last thing I saw before we drove away was a twisted, inhuman shape emerging from the mist. This agonized howl fading into the night. I never went camping alone again after that night. The wilderness held a new terror for me now, one that no amount of rationalization could. And on those nights, I wake up in a cold sweat, grateful for the solid walls around me, and the distance between myself and those dark, hungry woods. The streetlights flickered ominously as I pulled up to the curb, the app on my phone. It was well past midnight, and the usually bustling streets of downtown were eerily empty. I'd been driving for rideshare services for months now, but something about tonight felt off. I spotted my passenger immediately, a tall, lean man in a dark coat, his face partly obscured by the brim of a fedora. As he approached the car, I forced a smile and unlocked the doors. Just another late-night fare, I told myself. Nothing to worry about. Evening, I said as he slid into the back seat, heading to Oakwood Avenue. Right? He nodded silently, his eyes meeting mine in the rearview mirror. There was something unsettling about his gaze, a coldness that sent a shiver down my spine. I pulled away from the curb, the silence in the car thick and oppressive. Usually I try to make small talk with passengers, but something told me to keep quiet. We'd been driving for about 5 minutes when he finally spoke. "Do you do this often? Drive at night?" His voice was low and gravelly with an accent I couldn't quite place. "Yeah, a few nights a week," I replied, trying to keep my tone casual. "It helps pay the bills," he hummed thoughtfully. "Must meet all sorts of interesting people." I nodded, my eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. He was staring intently at the back of my head, and I quickly looked back at the road. "So what's your story?" he asked, leaning forward slightly. "What brings a person like you to this line of work?" The way he said it made my skin crawl, like he was tasting the word and finding it lacking. "Oh, just trying to make ends meet," I said, aiming for a light tone. "The flexible hours work well with my schedule," he repeated slowly. "And what else does your schedule involve?" I swallowed hard, my hands tightening on the steering wheel. This was veering into territory that felt dangerous. "Not much," I said, forcing a laugh. "How? Ordinary." We drove in silence for a few more minutes, the streets growing darker and less familiar as we headed towards the outskirts of town. "Tell me about your family." My blood ran cold. I hadn't mentioned anything about my family. They don't really have much family. Furthermore, I lied, trying to keep my voice steady. "No," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "That's not what your profile says. In fact, it mentions a sister in Millbrook." Was it? Lovely little town. My heart was pounding now. How did he know that? My rideshare profile didn't have any personal information like that. "I think you must be mistaking me for someone else," I said, my voice shaking slightly. He chuckled, a low, menacing sound that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "Oh, I don't think so, Sarah," he said, using my name for the first time. "I think I know exactly who you are." I felt panic rising in my chest. This wasn't right. None of this was right. "I think there's been some kind of mistake," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Maybe we should end the ride here. Keep driving," he said, his voice suddenly hard and cold. "We're not finished yet." I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw him reaching into his coat. My heart leapt into my throat as I imagined what he might be pulling out. At that moment, I made a split-second decision. I slammed on the brakes, the car screeching to a halt. The sudden stop threw him forward, and I used that moment of confusion to unbuckle my seatbelt and fling open the driver's door. I ran, my feet pounding on the pavement, not daring to look back. I could hear him shouting behind me, the car door slamming shut. The street was dark and unfamiliar, houses looming on either side with no lights on. I darted between two buildings, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I could hear his footsteps behind me, getting closer. Furthermore, I pushed myself harder, my lungs burning. Suddenly I stumbled, my foot catching on an uneven patch of ground. I went down hard, scraping my hands and knees on the rough pavement. Before I could get up, a hand grabbed my ankle, yanking me back. I screamed, kicking out wildly, but his grip was like iron. He flipped me over, looming over me in the darkness. In the faint moonlight, I could see his face clearly for the first time. His eyes were wild, a manic grin spreading across his features. Now, he said, his voice mockingly gentle. That wasn't very nice. Darren, Sarah. We were having such a lovely conversation. I struggled against his grip, but he was too strong. How do you know my name? I gasped. What do you want? He tilted his head, regarding me with an almost curious expression. I know everything about you, Sarah, your hopes, your fears, your dirty little secrets. He leaned in closer, his breath hot on my face. And what I want is to play a game. My mind raced, trying to figure out how to escape. I needed to keep him talking, buy myself some time. What kind of game? I asked, my voice trembling. He smiled, a predatory grin that made my blood run cold. Oh, it's a simple game. I ask questions, and you answer truthfully for every lie. He pulled something from his coat, a long, wicked-looking knife that glinted in the moonlight. Well, let's just say the consequences are sharp. I swallowed hard, my eyes fixed on the knife, and if I refused to play, his grip on my arm tightened painfully. That's not an option, Sarah. The game has already begun. I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breathing. I needed to think to find a way out of this nightmare. First question, he said, his voice taking on a sing-song quality. Why did you really start driving at nights? I hesitated, my mind racing. The truth was embarrassing, but lying seemed far more dangerous. I was trying to avoid someone, I admitted, an ex who wouldn't leave me alone. I thought working nights would make it harder for him to find me. He nodded, seeming pleased. Very good, Sarah. Honesty suits you. Next question. What's your biggest fear? My heart pounded as I considered my answer, but the knife gleamed menacingly in his hand, a clear warning against deception. Being helpless, I whispered, hating how vulnerable the admission made me feel. The truth was too revealing, too personal, not being in control of my own life. He smiled, a cold, calculating expression that made me shudder. Interesting. And right now, how in control do you feel, Sarah? I bit back a sob, anger and fear warring inside me. What do you want from me? Why are you doing this? I demanded, my voice cracking. He tasked, wagging the knife in front of my face. Now, that's not how the game works. I asked the questions. Remember? Suddenly a bright light flooded the alley, momentarily blinding us both. The sound of an engine revving filled the air, and my attacker's head snapped up. A car had turned into the alley, its high beams illuminating the scene. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. Then, with a snarl of frustration, my attacker released me, scrambling to his feet. He took one last look at me, his eyes burning with the promise of future retribution, before darting off into the shadows. It was another rideshare driver I knew, a kind older woman named Marge. Sarah, my God, are you all right? The car screeched to a halt beside me, and a familiar face leaned out of the driver's window. She asked, her voice thick with concern. Marge, how did you find me? I nodded weakly, still shaking as I pulled myself to my feet. She helped me into the passenger seat, her eyes scanning the darkness warily. I got a notification about a canceled ride in this area. Something felt off, so I came to check. As we drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. The man's last look haunted me, a clear message that our game was merely postponed, not ended. Thank goodness I did. In the days that followed, I gave a statement to the police, changed my phone number sign, and moved to a new apartment. I stopped driving at night, too afraid of who might get into my car. But even now, months later, I can't shake the fear. Every time I see a man in a dark coat or hear footsteps behind me at night, my heart races. I know he's out there somewhere waiting for our paths to cross again. And when they do, I fear the game will begin anew. The moment we pulled into the driveway of our new home, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the crisp bottom air, with stakes higher than I can imagine. The house was beautiful, a charming Victorian with a wraparound porch and gabled windows. But something about the way the neighbors' curtains twitched, the sudden silence, fell over the previously bustling street, made my stomach churn with unease. Home sweet home, my husband Mark announced cheerfully as he cut the engine. Our kids Lily and Tom bounced excitedly in the back seat, eager to explore their new home territory. I forced a smile, trying to shake off the growing sense of dread. As we unloaded the car, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every few moments, I'd catch glimpses of faces in windows, quickly disappearing when I turned to look directly. It was probably just curiosity about the new neighbors, I told myself. Nothing sinister about that. The first few days were a whirlwind of unpacking and settling in. The neighbors seemed friendly enough, stopping by with casseroles and welcome baskets. I left the library in a daze, my mind reeling with the implications of what I'd learned. As I walked home, I noticed the stares of the townspeople more acutely. Their smiles seemed more like grimaces, their eyes cold and calculating. I burst through the front door, ready to tell Mark everything, only to find him sitting in the living room, surrounded by neighbors. They all turned to look at me as I entered, their faces eerily blank. "Ah, there you are, honey," Mark said, his voice strangely flat. "We were just discussing the upcoming town festival." I stood frozen in the doorway, my heart pounding. "The neighbors think we should host it here." This wasn't right. None of this was right. I don't think that's a good idea," I stammered, backing away slowly. "Oh, but we insist," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Mrs. Johnson stood up, her movements stiff and unnatural. "It's tradition, you see. The newest family always hosts." I looked at Mark, silently pleading for him to see the danger we were in, but his eyes were glazed over, a placid smile fixed on his face. "Where are the kids?" "Ah, they're playing at the park with the other children," I asked, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. "Mr. Thompson from across the street said, 'Don't worry, they're in good hands.'" The way he said it made my skin crawl. I knew then that I had to get us out of there, and fast. "Long day at the library. Why don't you all continue without me?" I need to lie down," I said, faking a yawn. I hurried upstairs, my mind racing. I had to get the kids, had to convince Mark, had to get us all out of this town before it was too late. I threw some clothes and essentials into a bag, my hands shaking so badly I could barely zip it closed. As I was about to leave the room, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Heavy, deliberate footsteps that didn't belong to my husband or children. I looked around frantically for a weapon, anything I could use to defend myself. My eyes fell on a heavy brass lamp on the bedside table. I unplugged it, gripping it tightly as I positioned myself behind the door. The footsteps stopped outside the room. I held my breath, my heart pounding so loudly. I was sure they could hear it. The door creaked open slowly. I raised the lamp, ready to strike. "Mom?" Lily's voice made me freeze. I lowered the lamp, relief flooding through me as my daughter stepped into the room, but something was off. Her movements were too stiff, her eyes unfocused. "Honey, are you okay?" I asked, reaching out to her. She smiled, but it wasn't her smile. It was too wide, too forced. "Everything's fine, Mom. The neighbors say it's time. We need to go downstairs now." I backed away, my relief turning to horror. "Lily, sweetie, listen to me. We need to leave, now." Her head tilted at an unnatural angle. "But Mom, we can't leave. We're home now, forever." I heard more footsteps, saw shadows moving in the hallway. They were coming for us. At that moment, survival instinct took over. I grabbed the bag, pushed past Lily, and ran. Down the stairs, through the kitchen, out the back door. I could hear shouts behind me, footsteps giving chase. I ran like I'd never run before, my lungs burning, my legs aching. Furthermore, I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to get away. Away from the house, away from the town, away from the nightmare we'd unwittingly walked into. As I reached the town limits, I risked a glance back. What I saw made my blood run cold. The entire town was behind me, moving as one, their faces blank and eyes empty. At the front were Mark and the kids, reaching out to me, calling for me to come back. But I knew if I went back, I'd never leave again. I don't know how long I ran, or how I eventually found my way to a police station in 2 towns over. With tears streaming down my face, I turned and kept running, the sound of their calls fading behind me. They didn't believe my story, of course. How could they? It sounded insane even to my own ears. But I know what I saw. I know what we escaped from. And I know that somewhere in that picturesque little town, my family is waiting for me to come back, waiting to complete whatever dark ritual we had unknowingly become a part of. He'll find a way to save them. I have to. But for now, all I can do is warn others. Be careful where you make your home. Sometimes the most dangerous monsters are the ones hiding behind welcome baskets and friendly smiles. The old farmhouse stood silent against the backdrop of rolling hills, its weathered facade a stark contrast to the sleek photos on the Airbnb listing. As I pulled into the gravel driveway, a sense of unease settled over me like a heavy fog. This was supposed to be my writer's retreat, a chance to finish my novel in peace. But something about this place felt off. I shook off the feeling, chalking it up to city dweller jitters, and grabbed my bags. From the trunk, the key was exactly where the host said it would be, tucked under a flower pot by the front door. As I turned it in the lock, the door creaked open with an ominous groan that seemed to echo through the empty house. The interior was charming in a rustic sort of way, all exposed beams and antique furniture, but there was a mustiness to the air, a feeling of neglect that no amount of artfully arranged throw pillows could disguise. I ran a finger along a nearby shelf, leaving a clear trail in the thin layer of dust. "Hello?" I called out, more out of habit than expectation. The listing had promised complete privacy, after all, but my voice seemed to be swallowed by the silence, as if the very walls were absorbing the sound. I spent the rest of the afternoon settling in, unpacking my clothes, and setting up my laptop in the cozy study upstairs. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the wooden floors, I decided to call it a day to get some rest. That's when I heard it, a soft thump like something being set down, coming from somewhere below. I froze, my heart suddenly racing. It was probably nothing, I told myself. An old house settling, maybe, or a branch hitting the roof. But then I heard it again, and again, a rhythmic sound, almost like footsteps. I crept to the top of the stairs, straining my ears. The sound had stopped, but now there was something else, a faint scratching, like nails on wood, coming from behind the walls. "Hello?" I called again, my voice shaky. "Is someone there?" Silence. I laughed nervously, trying to shake off the growing sense of dread. I was being ridiculous. There was no one here but me. I was letting my writer's imagination run wild. That's all. I went to bed that night with all the lights on, telling myself it was just so I could read before sleep. But every creak of the house, every whisper of wind outside, had me sitting bolt upright. My heart is pounding. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the curtains, feeling foolish about it. My night terrors. I made myself a strong cup of coffee and settled into work, determined to make up for lost time. But as the day wore on, little things kept pulling me out of my writing flow. A door I could have sworn I'd left open was now closed. A book had fallen from a shelf when I wasn't looking. And always, that feeling of being watched. By mid-afternoon, I couldn't shake the sensation that something was very wrong. I decided to do a thorough search of the house, if only to put my mind at ease. I started in the basement, a dank, cobweb-filled space that sent shivers down my spine. As I swept my flashlight across the room, something caught my eye. A section of the wall looked eaten off. The bricks didn't quite match the rest. Heart pounding, I approached it. Up close, I could see that the mortar was newer, not as weathered as the surrounding area. With trembling hands, I pressed against it. To my horror, it moved slightly. I stumbled back, my mind reeling. What was behind that wall? And more importantly, who had sealed it up? I raced back upstairs, my thoughts a jumble of terror and curiosity. Should I call the police? The Airbnb host? But what would I say? I had a hunch there was something sinister hidden in the basement. As night fell, I paced the living room, debating my next move. That's when I heard it again. The footsteps. But this time, they weren't coming from below. They were coming from the attic. My blood ran cold. I knew I should run, should get in my car and drive as far away from this place as possible. But something held me back. I need to know, to understand what was happening in this house. With shaking hands, I grabbed a heavy candlestick from the mantel and made my way to the attic. Stairs. Each step creaked under my weight, announcing my presence to whatever waited above. The attic was pitch black, the beam of my flashlight barely penetrating the gloom. Dust motes danced in the light, stirred up by my presence and by something else. There, in the far corner, something moved. A shadow, darker than the surrounding darkness, shifting and writhing. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. The shadow stilled. Then slowly it began to take shape. A figure, hunched and twisted, turned to face me. My foot caught on something, sending me crashing to the floor. The figure moved towards me, its movements jerky and unnatural. The flashlight, I swung it up, the beam catching the figure full in the face. What I saw made my blood run cold. It wasn't a person, not anymore. Its face was a grotesque mask of decay, skin mottled and peeling. But its eyes were alive, filled with a hunger that turned my insides to ice. This couldn't be real. You shouldn't be here. It rasped, its voice like sandpaper on stone. It couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It had to be a nightmare, a hallucination brought on by stress and lack of sleep. The creature took another step forward, its joints cracking with each movement. "This is our home," it hissed. "You're not welcome here. Our home." The words echoed in my mind, and suddenly, horribly, I understood. The walled-up section in the basement, the constant feeling of being watched. This thing, whatever it was, wasn't alone. As if in response to my realization, I heard more movement. From the shadows, from behind the boxes and old furniture, more figures emerged, each as twisted and decayed as the first. I found my voice then, a scream tearing from my throat as I scrambled to my feet. I ran blind with terror, stumbling down the attic stairs and through the house. Behind me I could hear them, the shuffle of feet, the rasp of labored breathing. They were following, hunting me through the house that was supposed to be my sanctuary. I reached the front door, yanking at the handle. It wouldn't budge. Locked. I fumbled with the deadbolts, my fingers clumsy with fear. When was it locked? They were getting closer. I could feel their cold breath on the back of my neck, hear their nails scraping against the walls. I burst out into the cool night air, not daring to look back as I ran to my car. In my rearview mirror, I caught one last glimpse of the farmhouse. Figures stood in every window, their pale faces watching as I fled. Only then, in the harsh light of day, did I allow myself to think about what had happened. I never went back to that farmhouse. I left a vague review on Airbnb, warning others about strange noises and unsettling atmosphere. But how could I explain the truth? Sometimes, late at night, I still hear those footsteps. I still feel those eyes watching me from the shadows. And I wonder, with a chill that goes bone deep, if maybe I didn't escape after all. If maybe, somehow I bought a piece of that house's horror home with me. Because in those moments between sleep and waking, when the world is at its quietest, I swear I can hear a voice, rasping, hungry, and all too familiar. "You're not welcome here." The first thing I noticed when the lights went out was the silence. One moment, the hum of the refrigerator and the soft whir of my laptop fan filled the air. The next, nothing. Just the sound of my own breathing, suddenly loud in the darkness. I fumbled for my phone, the screen's glow momentarily blinding me. 9:47 p.m. No signal. Great. It's fine, I muttered to myself, trying to quell the unease growing in my chest. Just a power outage happens all the time. But as I moved through my apartment, using my phone's flashlight to navigate, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The darkness outside seemed thicker than usual, as if the entire world had been swallowed by an inky void. I tried the landline, but it was dead too. No dial tone, not even a crackle of static. Just silence. That's when I heard it. A soft scratching at the front door, so faint I almost missed it. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. It could be anything, I told myself. A tree branch, a stray cat, but deep down I knew it wasn't. The scratching came again, louder this time, more insistent in the thud, as if someone or something had thrown their weight against the door. My heart was pounding now, blood rushing in my ears. I backed away slowly, my eyes fixed on the door. The thudding continued, growing more forceful with each impact. I retreated to my bedroom, locking the door behind me. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. No signal, no way to call for help. The assault on the front door stopped abruptly. For a moment, silence reigned again. Then footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving through my living room. I clapped a hand over my mouth to stifle a whimper. This couldn't be happening. It had to be a nightmare. But the cold sweat on my skin, the trembling in my limbs, it all felt too real. The footsteps drew closer, pausing outside my bedroom door. I held my breath, praying that whoever, whatever was out there, would move on. A soft chuckle broke the silence, sending chills down my spine. "I know you're in there," a voice called out, low and raspy. "Why don't you come out and play?" I backed away from the door, my mind racing. The window, it was my only chance. I moved towards it, trying to be as quiet as possible. The doorknob rattled. Now, the voice crooned. "Don't be rude. I've come all this way to see you." My fingers fumbled with the window latch. It was old, stiff from disuse. I pushed harder. Panic gave me strength. The door shuddered as something heavy slammed against it. Once, twice, the window finally gave way, sliding up with a groan that seemed deafening in the quiet apartment. Cold night air rushed in, carrying with it the scent of rain and something else. Something rotten. I was halfway out the window when the bedroom door splintered. In the dim light from my discarded phone, I caught a glimpse of my intruder, tall. I didn't wait to see more. Unnaturally thin, with eyes that glowed like embers in the darkness. I scrambled out onto the fire escape, the metal grating cold against my bare feet. Furthermore, I could hear it moving behind me, its breathing harsh and excited. Furthermore, I ran down the stairs, the old structure creaking and swaying beneath me. My foot slipped on a wet step, and I nearly fell. A hand grabbed at my shirt, fingers like ice grazing my back. Panic gave me wings. I flew down the remaining stairs, jumping the last few feet to the alley below. The impact jarred my bones, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. I ran blindly through the dark streets, the sound of pursuit close behind. The entire city seemed deserted. Every window dark, every door closed. Where was everyone? A car. I needed to find a car. My keys were in my pocket. I always kept them there. A habit born from late nights at the office. If I could just find my car, I could escape. I turned a corner and there it was. My beat-up old sedan, a beacon of hope in the darkness. I fumbled with the keys, acutely aware of the footsteps drawing nearer. The keys slid home and I wrenched the door open, throwing myself inside. The engine coughed once, twice, then roared to life. I jammed the key into the ignition, turning it with desperate force. I slammed the car into drive just as a shape loomed in my rearview mirror. I floored it, tires squealing on the wet pavement. In the mirror, I saw it standing in the middle of the road, watching me flee. Even from a distance, I could see its mouth stretched in an impossible grin. I drove for hours, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. Every shadow on the road made me flinch. Every rustle of wind sounded like whispered threats. As the first light of dawn broke the horizon, I finally allowed myself to relax slightly. I had escaped. I was safe, but then my car radio crackled to life, startling me so badly I nearly swerved off the road. Through the static, a familiar voice spoke, low, raspy, amused. "Did you really think you could run from me?" I screamed, slamming on the brakes. The car skidded to a stop in the middle of the empty highway. The silence fell once more. The radio was dead, the voice gone. But as I sat there, shaking and sobbing, I knew the truth. The darkness had followed me, and it always would. In the days that followed, I tried to convince myself it had all been a terrible nightmare. I went back to my apartment, cleaned up the broken door, and tried to resume my normal life. But things are different now. The lights never seemed quite bright enough. And always, there was that feeling of being watched. The shadows in the corners of my room seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. I started sleeping with the lights on, but it didn't help. I moved to apartments, then cities, but it didn't matter. In the quiet hours of the night, I would hear it, soft scratching at my door, whispered promises of games yet to be played. Wherever I went, the darkness followed. In crowded streets, I would catch glimpses of a tall figure with glowing eyes. In busy cafes, I would hear that raspy chuckle just behind me. Jenny huddled closer to me, her earlier optimism fading with each step. "Mike," she whispered, "do you ever get the feeling that we're being watched?" I was about to dismiss her fears when I saw it too. A flicker of movement in the cornfield to our right. I squinted into the darkness, but whatever it was had vanished. "It's probably just an animal," I said, trying to convince myself as much as her. "Come on, we're almost there." The farmhouse loomed ahead, a decrepit Victorian silhouette against the darkening sky. As we approached, I could see that it had seen better days. I hesitated at the bottom of the porch steps, a sense of unease creeping up my spine. Paint peeled from the weathered siding, and several windows were boarded up. But we had come too far to turn back now. I raised my hand to knock on the door, but before my knuckles could make contact, it creaked open. An elderly couple stood in the doorway, their faces etched with deep wrinkles and wary expressions. The woman's eyes darted between Jenny and me while the man's gaze remained fixed on a point just over my shoulder. "Can we help you?" the woman asked, her voice thin and reedy. I explained our situation, trying to ignore the prickling sensation at the back of my neck. Something about their blank stares and two wide smiles set my nerves on edge. Of course, the old man said, his voice surprisingly deep and resonant. "Your poor dears must be exhausted. Come in. We have a phone you can use." Jenny shot me a relieved smile as we stepped over the threshold. The interior of the house was as dated as its exterior, with faded floral wallpaper and furniture that looked like it hadn't been moved in decades. The old woman introduced herself as Martha and her husband as Jeb. They led us to a dusty parlor where an ancient rotary phone sat on a side table. "I'm afraid the phone lines have been acting up lately," Jeb said apologetically, "but you're welcome to try. In the meantime, why don't you join us for supper? It's almost ready." I opened my mouth to decline, but Jenny spoke first. "That would be lovely." "Thank you." As Martha shuffled off to the kitchen, Jeb settled into a worn armchair, his roomy eyes fixed on us with an unsettling intensity. So he said, leaning forward slightly, "What brings you young folks to these parts?" We explained about our road trip, how we were heading to visit family in Little Rock. As we talked, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The room felt too still, the air too thick, and Jeb's gaze never wavered, even when Martha called him to help in the kitchen. Left alone, Jenny and I exchanged glances. "Maybe we should just try the phone and go," I whispered. She nodded, looking relieved. Though when I picked up the receiver, there was no dial tone, just dead silence. Before I could tell Jenny, Martha called us to dinner. The dining room was dimly lit by flickering candles, casting long shadows across the walls. The table was set with mismatched china and tarnished silverware. As we took our seats, I noticed strange symbols carved into the wooden chargebacks. They looked ancient, almost runic. A shiver ran down my spine. Martha set a large, wool-covered dish in the center of the table. "I hope you're hungry," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "It's a family recipe." When she lifted the lid, the smell hit me first. It was rich and meaty, but with an underlying odor that turned my stomach. The stew inside was dark, almost black, with unidentifiable chunks floating in the murky liquid. Jenny paled beside me. "It looks so interesting," she managed, always the polite one. Jeb and Martha watched us intently as they ladled the stew into our bowls. I lifted a spoonful, trying not to gag at the smell. Just as I was about to force myself to take a bite, a loud thump from upstairs made us all freeze. Martha's hand shook, spilling stew onto the tablecloth. "Just the house settling," Jeb said quickly, but his eyes darted nervously to the ceiling. Another thump, followed by the distinct sound of footsteps. Jenny grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "What was that?" I demanded, rising from my chair. Jeb stood as well, his friendly demeanor evaporating. "Sit down, boy," he growled, "eat your supper." The footsteps grew louder, descending the stairs. Martha began to mutter under her breath, walking back and forth in her chair. Suddenly, the dining room door burst open. In the doorway stood a figure that made my blood run cold. It was tall and possibly thin, with limbs that seemed too long for its body. Its skin was pale and mottled, stretched tight over protruding bones. But its face was the stuff of nightmares. Empty eye sockets stared at us, and its mouth was a gaping maw lined with jagged teeth. Jenny screamed. I grabbed her hand and we bolted for the door, knocking over chairs in our haste. When we reached us, I could hear Jeb shouting and Martha's high-pitched wailing. We burst out of the house and into the night, running blindly down the dirt driveway. The cornfields on either side seemed to press in on us, the stalks reaching out like grasping fingers. I chanced to look back and immediately wished I hadn't. The creature was following us, moving with an unnatural loping gait, and behind it, I could see Jeb and Martha, their faces contorted with a mixture of fear and hunger. We ran until our lungs burned, and our legs felt like lead. Finally, mercifully, we saw headlights approaching. I waved my arms frantically, and the pickup truck screeched to a halt beside us. The driver, an older man with a weathered face, took one look at our terrified expressions and threw open the passenger door. "Get in," he barked. Now. We didn't need to be told twice. As we peeled away, I looked in the side mirror. The farmhouse was receding in the distance, but I could still see figures standing in the road, watching us go. The driver, who introduced himself as Tom, listened in stunned silence as we recounted our experience. When we finished, he shook his head grimly. "You're not the first to have a run-in with the Hendersons," he said. "That farmhouse has been abandoned for years. But sometimes folks passing through say they've seen lights on, heard voices. Those who stop, well, they don't always come back." We rode in shocked silence for a while, the enormity of what we'd escaped slowly sinking in. Finally, Tom spoke again. "Legend has it that the Hendersons made a deal with something evil long ago, promised it would keep them alive forever, as long as they provided it with sustenance." I shuddered, remembering the strange stew, the horrible creature in the doorway. Jenny clutched my hand, her face pale in the dashboard light. Tom dropped us off at a motel in the next town, refusing any payment for the ride. As he drove away, he left us with a warning. "Be careful out there. Some roads aren't meant to be traveled, and some houses should be left alone." We never did finish that road trip. The next day, we called a tow truck for our car and booked the first flight home. But the memory of that night haunts me still, and in my nightmares I still hear Martha's sing-song voice calling us to dinner. Smell. Sometimes when I'm driving down a dark, lonely road, I can help but glance in my rearview mirror, half expecting to see a decrepit farmhouse materialize in the distance, its windows glowing with an inviting light, that sickly sweet stew, and see those empty, hungry eyes staring at me from the shadows. The security cameras blinked out one by one, each screen fading to static before going dark. I leaned closer to the monitors, my coffee forgotten in my hand as an icy chill crept up my spine. In my 3 years as a night guard at Oak Ridge Office Complex, I'd never seen anything like this. "What the hell?" I muttered, tapping frantically at the keyboard. Nothing responded. The entire system seemed to be dead. I reached for the phone to call my supervisor, but the line was dead. My cell phone showed no signal. It was as if the entire building had been cut off from the outside world. That's when I heard it. A soft thud followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoing through the empty halls. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The building was supposed to be empty. I was the only one here, tasked with watching over 20 floors of darkened offices and conference rooms. The footsteps grew louder, more purposeful. They weren't coming from the lobby or the elevators, but from deeper within the building. Impossible. I had locked everything down myself at the start of my shift. I stood up, my legs shaky beneath me. Protocol dictated that I should investigate any unusual activity, but every instinct screamed. I ran to get out of the building as fast as I could.
"Hello?"
I called out, my voice embarrassingly weak. "This is security. Identify yourself." Silence, then a low chuckle that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out of the security office, my heart hammering so I could hardly feel it in my throat. The hallway stretched before me, a dark tunnel punctuated by the dim glow of emergency exit signs. As I moved down the corridor, I became acutely aware of how loud my footsteps were, how heavily I was breathing. I swept my flashlight back and forth, its beam cutting through the darkness like a knife. The air felt different somehow, heavier, charged with a strange electricity that made the hair, my arms stand on end. I reached the elevator bank and hesitated. The smart thing would be to leave, to call for backup, but curiosity and a sense of duty pushed me forward. I pressed the call button, more out of habit than expectation. To my surprise, the elevator dinged, its doors sliding open with a soft whoosh. I stepped inside, my finger hovering over the floor buttons. Where did the sound come from? I tried to recall, to pinpoint its origin. When the doors finally opened, I half expected to see someone or something waiting for me. The ride up was agonizingly slow, each floor ticking by with excruciating deliberation. I stepped out, my flashlight beam dancing across empty cubicles and closed office doors. But the 10th floor was as dark and silent as the lobby had been. Maybe a door slammed somewhere to my left, the sound like a gunshot in the silence. I whirled around, my heart leaping into my throat. Who's there? I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. This is your last warning. Identify yourself, or I'm calling the police. I did another chuckle, closer this time, then a voice, low and raspy. Oh, I don't think you'll be calling anyone, friend. I spun around, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. For a split second, I caught a glimpse of a figure at the end of the hall, tall unnaturally, thin, with eyes that seemed to glow in the dark. Then it was gone, ducking into one of the offices. My mind raced. This wasn't a typical intruder. Something was very, very wrong here. I should leave, I thought. Get out, call for help. But what if this thing got away? What if it hurt someone else? Against my better judgment, I moved down the hallway, my free hand reaching for the pepper spray on my belt. I approached the office where I'd seen the figure disappear, my heart pounding so hard, I was sure it could be heard throughout the entire floor. With a deep breath, I pushed open the door. The office was dark, seemingly empty. I swept my flashlight around, illuminating a desk, some filing cabinets. The beam caught something reflective, two somethings. Eyes. I stumbled backward, fumbling with the pepper spray, but before I could raise it, a hand shot out of the darkness, knocking it from my grasp. The flashlight clattered to the floor, its beam spinning crazily around the room. In the strobing light, I caught glimpses of my attacker. Pale skin stretched tight over an elongated face, a mouth full of teeth that were far too sharp to be human, and those eyes glowing with an inner light that spoke of something ancient and malevolent. I turned to run, but it was faster, impossibly fast. Its hand closed around my arm, its grip like ice. Now, it said, its voice a rasping whisper. Don't you want to play? I struggled, panic giving me strength I didn't know I had. I managed to wrench free, bolting out of the office and down the hallway. Behind me I could hear it, laughing, the sound echoing off the walls. I ran for the stairs, not trusting the elevator. As I burst through the stairwell door, I heard it again, closer now. You can run, it called out, but you can hide. This is my playground now. I took the stairs two at a time, my lungs burning, my legs screaming in protest. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to get away. Furthermore, I emerged on another floor, the 15th floor according to the sign, and ran down the hallway, looking for somewhere to hide. Most of the offices were locked, but I finally found one that opened. I ducked inside, closing the door as quietly as I could. In the darkness, I fumbled for a hiding spot, eventually crawling under a large desk. For what felt like hours, I sat there, trying to control my breathing, straining my ears for any sound of pursuit. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the pounding of my own heart. Then footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving down the hallway outside. They paused outside the office door, and I held my breath, praying it would move on. A doorknob turned. I closed my eyes, as if not seeing the danger could somehow make it. It goes away. I can smell your fear, the voice said. Closer now. It's intoxicating. I opened my eyes to see a pair of legs standing in front of the desk. Slowly, painfully slowly, it crouched down, its face coming into view. At that moment, looking into its inhuman eyes, I understood true terror. This wasn't just an intruder or some psychopath. This was something else entirely, something that shouldn't exist in our world. It smiled, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. I found you, it said. What happened next is a blur. I remember screaming, lashing out with all my strength. Furthermore, I remember the thing always behind me, always just a step away, laughing at my futile attempts. I remember running again through hallways that seemed to stretch on forever, to escape. Somehow I made it to the lobby. The front doors were locked. When had they been locked? And in my desperation, I grabbed a chair and smashed through the glass. I ran into the night, not stopping until I collapsed on a busy street corner several times. Blocks away, people gathered around me, concerned faces asking if I was okay. They took me to the hospital, treating me for cuts and bruises I didn't even remember. The police came, then paramedics. I couldn't speak, couldn't explain what had happened. I told them my story, but I could see the disbelief in their eyes. They thought I was crazy or on drugs or both. The next day, detectives came to take my statement. They told me they'd searched the building, but found nothing out of the ordinary. The security cameras showed no intruder, just me running through the halls in a panic, fighting against something that wasn't there. I quit my job that day. I couldn't face going back to that building. Furthermore, I don't risk encountering that thing thus again. For weeks afterward, I jumped at every shadow, flinched at every unexpected sound. Even now, years later, I can shake the memory of those glowing eyes, that inhuman smile, Sometimes, late at night, I swear I can hear that rasping chuckle as if it's right outside my window. I don't work night shifts anymore. I avoid tall buildings and empty offices, but no matter where I go, no matter what I do, I can escape the feeling that someday, somehow, it will find me again. And next time, I might not be so lucky. The map crumpled in my shaking hands as I squinted at it in the fading light. This wasn't right. The trail should have looped back to the campsite hours ago. Instead, I found myself in a dense part of the forest I didn't recognize, with shadows growing longer in the air, taking on an ominous chill. I've always prided myself on my sense of direction, but as the reality of my situation sank in, pride gave way to a gnawing fear. I was lost, completely and utterly lost, in a wilderness that seemed to grow more menacing with each passing minute. Keep it together, Alex, I muttered to myself, trying to quell the panic rising in my chest. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of pine and damp earth. Think logically. Retrace your steps. Find higher ground. But as I turned to head back the way I came, I realized with a jolt that I couldn't remember. Which direction was that? The trees all looked the same, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers in the dimming light. That's when I heard it, a twig snapping, followed by the rustle of leaves. My heart leapt into my throat. "Hello," I called out, my voice embarrassingly shaky. "Is someone there?" Silence. Then, another snap. Closer this time. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I forced myself to stay. Still, it was probably just an animal, I reasoned. A deer maybe, or a raccoon. Nothing to be afraid of. But as the sounds drew nearer, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was out there was too big to be any woodland creature I was familiar with, and it was moving with purpose towards me. I backed away slowly, my eyes scanning the deepening shadows. That's when I saw it, a flicker of light in the distance, warm and inviting, like a cabin. Window illuminated against the darkness. Relief flooded through me. Civilization, safety. Without a second thought, I began moving towards the light, my pace quickening with each step. But at that moment, it was the most beautiful sight I'd ever seen. As I drew closer, I could make out the silhouette of a small cabin. It looked old, weathered by years of harsh winters and scorching summers. I approached the door, my hand raised to knock, when a floorboard creaked behind me. I spun around, my heart racing. There, at the edge of the clearing, stood a man, but it was his eyes that caught my attention. Pale and intense, he was tall and lean, with a weathered face that spoke of years spent in the wilderness. They seemed to glow in the twilight. "You look lost," he said, his voice gravelly and low. I nodded, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "I am. Furthermore, I got turned around somehow." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Furthermore, I was hiking in a... well, you're in luck. I was just about to have dinner." "Why don't you come in and warm up?" Stranger in the woods. Isolated cabin. Every horror movie I'd ever seen flashed through my mind. It was the setup for a dozen gruesome endings. But as another cold wind whipped through the clearing, I realized I didn't have much choice. It was this or spend the night lost in the increasingly hostile forest. "Thank you," I said, following him inside. The cabin was small but cozy, lit by the warm glow of oil lamps. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The man who introduced himself as John bustled about, ladling some kind of stew into wooden bowls. "Eat," he said, handing me a bowl. "You must be famished." I realized. I took a cautious sip of the stew. In my panic, I hadn't noticed the gnawing emptiness in my stomach. It was rich and hearty, with a taste I couldn't quite place. As I ate, John peppered me with questions. Where was I from? What brought me to these woods? I took my chance and ran. I burst out of the cabin, my lungs burning as I gulped in the cool morning air. Behind me, I could hear John shouting, his heavy footsteps giving chase. I ran faster than I ever had in my life, crashing through underbrush, leaping over fallen logs. Branches whipped at my face, leaving stinging scratches. But I didn't slow down. I could hear John behind me getting closer. Just when I thought my legs would give out, I broke through the tree line. There, in the distance, I saw a road. Civilization. Safety. With a final burst of energy, I sprinted towards it. The car appeared on the horizon, and I waved my arms frantically, screaming for help. The car slowed, then stopped. An older couple peered out at me, their faces etched with concern. I didn't wait for them to speak, just yanked open the back door and threw myself inside. "Drive," I yelled. "Please, just drive." As we sped away, I dared to look back. There, at the edge of the forest, I saw John. He stood perfectly still, watching the car disappear. Even from a distance, I could see that terrifying smile. I never went hiking alone again after that. The police searched the area, but found no trace of the cabin or John. Sometimes, late at night, I still wake up in a cold sweat, convinced I can hear his gravelly voice calling out to me from the darkness. John is still waiting for his next guest. And on those nights, I lie awake until dawn, grateful for locked doors and the safety of civilization, knowing that somewhere out there, in the deep dark woods, the package sat on my doorstep, innocuous and brown, addressed to someone I'd never heard of, Sarah Mitchell. The name meant nothing to me, but the return address sent a chill down my spine. 1313 Ravens Court, my apartment number, but not my street. I stood there, key in hand, staring at the parcel as if it might suddenly spring to life. I should have left it there, should have called the post office, explained the mix-up, but curiosity, that damn human trait, got the better of me. I picked up the package, unsurprisingly heavy for its size, and brought it inside. My apartment felt different somehow, as if the very air had changed with the introduction of this mysterious box. I set it on the kitchen counter, eyeing it warily as I went about my evening routine, but my gaze kept drifting back to it, questions swirling in my mind. Who was Sarah Mitchell? Why did the return address match my apartment number? And what was inside? It was past midnight when I finally gave in to temptation. I told myself I was just checking for a phone number, some way to contact the real recipient. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. The tape gave way easily under my knife. I peeled back the brown paper, revealing a plain cardboard box beneath. My heart was pounding as I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in crumpled newspaper, was a small wooden box, intricately carved with symbols I didn't recognize. Alongside it was a folded piece of paper. With trembling hands, I opened it. "Sarah, the time has come. You know what must be done." "Right." The cryptic message sent a shiver down my spine. I turned my attention to the wooden box, my fingers tracing the strange symbols. It was locked, a tiny keyhole barely visible among the carvings. That's when I heard it, a soft scratching sound coming from inside the box. I dropped it like it was on fire, stumbling back from the counter. The scratching continued, growing more insistent. Whatever was inside wanted out. Panic seized me. I grabbed the box, intending to throw it out the window to rid myself of this nightmare. But as my fingers closed round it, a jolt of electricity shot through my body. Images flashed before my eyes. A dark room, candles flickering, hooded figures chanting, in a language I didn't understand. I came to the floor, the box clutched to my chest. The scratching had stopped, but I could feel a faint pulse, like a tiny heartbeat emanating from within. My phone rang, making me jump. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. "Open the box, complete the ritual, or suffer the consequences. We know you have it." Too shaken to speak. A moment later, a message notification pinged. My blood ran cold. How did they know who they were and what ritual? I spent the next few days in a state of paranoid frenzy. I didn't leave my apartment, didn't answer my phone. The box sat on my coffee table, a constant reminder of the madness that had invaded my life. Sometimes, late at night, I'd hear the scratching again, soft and insistent. On the third day, there was a knock at my door. I froze, hardly daring to breathe. Through the peephole, I saw a man in a delivery uniform holding another package. "Delivery for Sarah Mitchell," he called out. My heart raced. I didn't answer, praying he had. "Go away." After a few moments, I heard him sigh and set the package down. His footsteps receded. Down the hallway. I waited an hour before cracking open the door. The package was there, identical to the first. This time, I didn't hesitate. I tore it open right there in the hallway. Inside was a key, small, ornate, and unmistakably designed for the wooden box. Along with it was another note. "Time is running out. Open the box. Speak the words, or we'll come for you." I slammed the door shut, leaning against it as I tried to calm my ragged breathing. This was insanity. I should go to the police and tell them everything. But who would believe me? That night, I sat on my couch, the box in front of me, the key in my hand. The scratching had started again, more frantic than ever. And what if these people, whoever they were, made good on their threats? I could feel the pulse of the box quickening, matching the rapid beat of my own heart. With shaking hands, I inserted the key. It turned smoothly, the lock clicking open with a sound that seemed to echo in the quiet apartment. I hesitated, my hand on the lid. Did I really want to see what was inside? Did I have a choice? I opened the box. A blinding light erupted from within, filling the room with an otherworldly glow. I shielded my eyes, feeling a rush of wind that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. At once, when I lowered my arm, I gasped. Hovering above the open box was a small, pulsating orb of energy. It thrummed with power, sending waves of heat and cold washing over me in alternating bursts. And somehow, impossibly, I could hear it whispering, "Speak the words." It hissed in a voice that was 1,000 voices. "Complete the ritual. Fulfill your destiny." I stumbled back, knocking over a lamp in my haste to get away. The orb followed, growing larger, its whispers becoming a deafening chorus.
Speak the words.
Speak the words. But I didn't know the words. I wasn't Sarah Mitchell. This wasn't meant for me. The orb pulsed angrily, tendrils of energy lashing out, scorching the walls and furniture. The temperature in the room skyrocketed. Sweat poured down my face as I cowered in the corner. "You are the chosen," the voices screamed. "You must complete the ritual." At that moment of terror and confusion, a memory surfaced. The vision I'd had when I first touched the box, the hooded figures, the chanting. Without thinking, I began to repeat the words I'd heard, a language I didn't understand pouring from my lips. The orb flared brightly, expanding to fill the room. I felt myself being lifted off the ground, suspended in the pulsing energy. The chant grew louder, my voice joining with the thousands of others, and then suddenly silence. I found myself standing in the middle of my destruction. I knew with a certainty that terrified me that I had changed. Living room, the box lying open and empty at my feet. The orb was gone, but I could feel it, energy thrumming through my veins. That the world had changed. A knock at the door made me jump. I approached cautiously, peering through the peephole. A group of people stood in the hallway, dressed in dark robes. The one in front smiled, and I recognized him as the delivery man from earlier. "Well done, Sarah," he said, though the door was still closed. Or should I say vessel of the ancients. "It's time to fulfill your true purpose." I stood there, frozen, as the reality of my situation sank in. I wasn't Sarah Mitchell. I had never been Sarah Mitchell, but I had opened the box. I had spoken the words, and now, for better or worse, I had become her. As I opened the door to face my new destiny, one thought echoed in my mind. Never ever open a package that isn't addressed to you. You never know what kind of Pandora's box you might be unleashing. The robed figures entered my apartment, their faces a mix of reverence and anticipation. The leader approached me, holding out a hand. "Come," he said. "There's much to be done." I took his hand, feeling the last vestiges of my old life slip away. Whatever lay ahead, whatever cosmic game I had unwittingly become a part of. There was no going back now. A package had been delivered, the ritual completed, and I, the accidental chosen one, was about to step into a world I never knew existed. As we left my apartment, my old life, behind, I couldn't help but wonder how many other Sarah Mitchells were out there, receiving packages not meant for them, unleashing forces they couldn't comprehend. And how many of them, like me, would be forever changed by a simple act of misplaced curiosity. The door closed behind us, with a final ominous click. My journey as the vessel of the ancients had begun, all because of a package that should never have been mine. The "Welcome to Millbrook" sign flashed by in an instant, faded paint peeling off weathered wood. I blinked, certain I had imagined it, and this was the first sign of civilization we'd seen. We'd been driving for hours on this deserted highway. "Did you see that?" I asked, turning to my friends in the back seat. Jake, his nose buried in his phone, grunted noncommittally. "Millbrook, that's not on here," she muttered, tracing our route with her finger. Sarah, our designated navigator, frowned at the map spread across her lap. I slowed the car, an uneasy feeling settling in my stomach. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, casting long shadows across the empty road. Maybe we should turn back, I suggested, my knuckles whitening on the steering wheel. Quaint houses lined quiet streets, their windows dark and uninviting. A lone streetlight flickered at an intersection, casting an eerie glow over the deserted main street. That's when we saw it, the town, seemingly materializing out of the twilight haze. "Well, this is charming," Jake said, finally looking up from his phone. The sarcasm in his voice couldn't quite mask the nervousness underneath. I pulled up to a stop sign, peering down the empty streets. Something felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on what. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the idle of our engine. "Let's just pass through," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Find the highway on the other side." I nodded, pressing gently on the gas. We crawled through the town, our headlights illuminating abandoned storefronts and overgrown lawns. It was as if the entire population had simply vanished. We were halfway through town when our engine sputtered and died. "No, no, no," I muttered, turning the key frantically. The engine wheezed but refused to start. "Guys," Jake's voice was tense. "Look." I followed his gaze and felt my blood run cold. Figures were emerging from the shadows, their movements slow and deliberate. They converged on our car from all directions, their faces hidden in the growing darkness. "Lock the doors," Sarah yelled, but I was already fumbling with the controls. The click of the locks engaging seemed impossibly loud in the quiet night. We sat there, hearts pounding, as the figures drew closer. I could make out their features now, blank expressions. An old woman stood there, her face inches from the glass, eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light. A tap on my window made me jump. Her mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear. Against my better judgment, I cracked the window, just an inch. "Can you help us?" I asked, my voice shaking. Our car broke down. The old woman's face split into a grin, revealing teeth that were just a bit too sharp. "Oh, we can help you," she said, her voice raspy and cold. "We've been waiting for you." A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean, waiting for us?" Her grin widened. "It's been so long since we've had visitors. So long since we've been able to feed." I slammed the window shut, my heart racing. "We need to get out of here, now." Jake was already trying the back doors, but they wouldn't budge. "They're jammed," he yelled, panic evident in his voice. The figures were pressed against the car now, their hands leaving smears on the windows. I could hear a low chanting, the words indistinguishable but filled with malice. Sarah let out a strangled cry. "The windows. Look at the windows." I watched in horror as the glass began to fog, intricate patterns of frost spreading across the surface. The temperature inside the car plummeted, our breath coming out in visible puffs. "What's happening?" Jake's voice was high with fear. I didn't have an answer. I turned the key again, praying for the engine to start. It coughed once, twice, and then roared to life. "Hold on," I yelled, slamming the car into drive. We lurched forward, the figures scattering before us. I didn't slow down, didn't look back, just pressed the gas pedal to the floor and drove. The town streets seemed to shift and change as we sped through them, familiar landmarks appearing in impossible places. Every turn led us back to the center of town, the old woman's cackling laughter echoing in our ears. "They won't let us leave. We can get out," Sarah sobbed from the back seat. I gritted my teeth, determination replacing fear. "Yes, we can, we have to." I made a hard right, tires squealing on the pavement. There, at the end of the street, was the "Welcome to Millbrook" sign, our way out. The engine whined as I pushed it to its limits. The sign grew larger in our windshield, 50 feet, 25 feet, 10 feet. Suddenly a wall of townspeople materialized before us, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. I hesitated for a split second, then pressed the gas harder. There was a sickening thud, and then we were through. "Hold on," I screamed as we plowed into the crowd. The "Welcome to Millbrook" sign disappeared in our rearview mirror. Along with the nightmare town, we drove in silence for miles, the adrenaline slowly fading, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. It wasn't until the first rays of dawn peeked over the horizon that I finally felt safe enough to pull over. We sat there on the side of the highway, trying to process what had happened. Our car was dented and scratched. Evidence that the night's events weren't just a shared hallucination. What were they? Sarah finally asked, her voice hoarse. I shook my head. I don't know, and I don't want to know. Jake, who had been unusually quiet, spoke up. Guys, look at this. He held up his phone, showing us a web search he'd managed to do. Once we got back in range, the headline made my blood run cold. Millbrook, the town that disappeared. The article went on to describe how 50 years ago, the entire population of Millbrook had vanished overnight. Searches had turned up nothing. The town had been abandoned, left to rot. But we were just there, Sarah whispered. We saw them. I started the car, my hands shaking slightly. Let's get out of here. I don't ever want to take a shortcut again. As we pulled back onto the highway, I couldn't shake the feeling that we escaped something ancient and hungry, something that would be waiting for the next unsuspecting travelers to stumble into its trap. I pressed the gas pedal harder, eager to put as much distance between us and Millbrook as possible. But even as the miles ticked by, I couldn't escape the memory of those glowing eyes, or the old woman's words echoing in my mind. We've been waiting for you. I shuddered, knowing that somewhere behind us, in a town that shouldn't exist, they were still waiting. And I prayed that no one else would ever take that fatal wrong turn into Millbrook. The air in the lab felt different that night, thicker somehow, charged with an energy that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I'd been working late, as usual, poring over data from our latest experiments, but something wasn't right. The numbers didn't add up, and the silence in the normally bustling research facility was deafening. I stretched, my back cracking after hours hunched over my computer. A faint blue glow emanating from beneath the door of Dr. Erickson's office. That's when I noticed it. Odd. He'd left hours ago, along with the rest of the staff. Curiosity got the better of me, barely audible, but unmistakably there. As I got closer, I could hear a low hum. I approached the door, my footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. My hand hesitated on the doorknob. I knew I shouldn't be snooping, but something compelled me forward. The door creaked open, and I gasped. Dr. Erickson's usually immaculate office was in disarray. Papers were strewn everywhere, and strange symbols were scrawled across his whiteboards. But what caught my eye was the source of the blue glow, a small device on his desk, pulsing with an otherworldly light. I stepped closer, transfixed. The device looked like nothing I'd ever seen before. It was roughly the size of a softball, covered in intricate etchings that seemed to shift and change as I watched. The humming grew louder as I approached. The moment my fingers made contact, a jolt of electricity shot through my body, and I could feel a strange vibration in the air. Without thinking, I reached out to touch it. Images flashed before my eyes. Strange landscapes, bizarre creatures, advanced technology beyond my wildest imagination. And then darkness. I came to the floor, my head throbbing. How long had I been out? I checked my watch and felt my stomach drop. Scrambling to my feet, I looked around wildly. 3 hours had passed, Alan, but it felt like only seconds. Furthermore, I would never be able to return to my old life, my old understanding of the world. But staying meant capture, possibly worse. I knew with a certainty that terrified me that stepping through that portal would change everything. The sound of approaching footsteps made the decision for me. I took a deep breath and stepped into the unknown. The sensation was indescribable. It felt like I was being torn apart and put back together. Molecule by molecule, colors I had no names for swirled around me. Equations and formulas danced across my vision, explaining the very fabric of the universe. And then suddenly it was over. I found myself standing in a vast chamber, unlike anything I'd ever seen. The walls were made of a material that seemed to shift and change, sometimes solid, sometimes translucent. Strange machines hummed and pulsed, their purpose beyond my comprehension. "Welcome, Dr. Levine," a voice said behind me. I spun around to see Dr. Erickson standing there, but he looked different, older yet somehow more vital. His eyes held a wisdom and sadness that hadn't been there before. "What is this place?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "What's happening?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "This, my dear, is where we truly push the boundaries of science, where we explore realities beyond our own. Some looked human, others decidedly not." As he spoke, more people entered the chamber. They all regarded me with a mixture of emotions and emotions. They all regarded me with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "You weren't supposed to find out about this," Dr. Erickson continued. "Not yet, but now that you're here, you have a choice to make." He gestured to a device on a nearby pedestal. It looked like a more advanced version of the one I touched in his office. "You can go back. Well, wipe your memory and you can return to your old life. Or," I prompted, my heart racing, "or you can stay. Join us. Help us unlock the secrets of the multiverse. But know this, if you choose to stay, there's no going back. Your old life, everyone you've ever known or loved, will be lost to you forever." I stood there, my mind reeling. Part of me wanted to run back through that portal to forget everything I'd seen, and return to the comfortable ignorance of my former life. But a larger part, the part that had always pushed me to question, to explore, to seek out the unknown, knew there was only one real choice. I took a deep breath and stepped towards the device. "Where do we start?" Dr. Erickson's face broke into a genuine smile this time. "Welcome to the team, Dr. Levine. We have so much to show you." As the others gathered around, eager to begin my initiation into this new world of endless possibilities, I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and terror. I had no idea what lay ahead, what wonders of horrors I might encounter, but I knew one thing for certain: my life would never be the same again. And as I gazed out at the shifting walls of the chamber, catching glimpses of other worlds, other realities, I realized that my journey into the unknown had only just begun. The old Victorian bed and breakfast loomed before me. Its weathered facade is a stark contrast to the quaint charm promised by the brochure. As I lugged my suitcase up the creaking steps, the chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the autumn breeze. Something about this place felt off. I'd booked a weekend stay on a whim, desperate for a break from my hectic city life. The Willow Creek Inn had seemed perfect, secluded, historic, and supposedly home to the best blueberry pancakes in the state. But standing there, key in hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd made a terrible mistake. The door swung open before I could insert the key. Her smile was warm, but it didn't quite reach her eyes, revealing a petite woman with silver hair and piercing blue eyes. "Welcome to Willow Creek Inn," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "You must be Emily. We've been expecting you." I forced a smile, trying to ignore the unease growing in my stomach. "That's me. Thanks for having me." She ushered me inside, chattering about the inn's history and amenities. But I was only half listening, my attention caught by the strange symbols carved into the wooden banister. They looked ancient, almost runic. "Your room is on the third floor," the innkeeper, who introduced herself as Mrs. Holloway, said, snapping me back to the present. "Last door on the right. Dinner is at 7 in the main dining room. Don't be late." There was something in her tone, a hint of threat. I shook my head, chiding myself for being paranoid. I was here to relax, not invent mysteries where there were none. As I climbed the stairs, I couldn't help but notice how quiet the inn was. Weren't there supposed to be other guests? The brochure had mentioned the place being fully booked this time of year. My room was small but cozy, with floral wallpaper and a 4-poster bed that looked like it belonged in a museum. I unpacked quickly, eager to explore the grounds before dinner. The gardens behind the inn were beautiful, a riot of autumnal colors. But as I wandered deeper into the property, I noticed something strange. Hidden among the trees and bushes were small stone statues, their features worn smooth by time. They all seemed to be facing the inn, their blank eyes somehow accusing. A twig snapped behind me, and I whirled around. A man stood there, tall and lean, with a gardener's apron tied around his waist. His smile was friendly, but there was something unsettling about his eyes. "Enjoying the gardens, miss?" he asked, his voice gravelly. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "They're lovely. Those statues are interesting." "Ah, yes. Family heirlooms. Those..." His smile faltered for a moment. Best not to pay them too much mind. Before I could ask what he meant, the dinner bell rang. The gardener's smile returned too wide and too bright. I made my way back to the inn, my mind whirling with questions. As I entered the dining room, I was surprised to see other guests already seated. "Best hurry along now. Mrs. Holloway doesn't like to be kept waiting." There were 5 of them, all middle-aged or older, all watching me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. Mrs. Holloway appeared at my elbow, guiding me to an empty seat. "So glad you could join us." "Emily, We were just about to begin. The meal was delicious, but I barely tasted it. The conversation around the table was stilted and odd, full of inside jokes and meaningful glances that excluded me. And every time I tried to ask a question about the inn or the other guests, the subject was quickly changed. As dessert was served, a blood-red sorbet that Mrs. Holloway insisted was her special recipe, I noticed the other guests watching me expectantly. The room seemed to hold its breath as I took my first bite. The flavor exploded on my tongue, unlike anything I'd ever tasted before. It was delicious, but there was an underlying bitterness that made me uneasy. As I swallowed, a wave of dizziness washed over me. "Are you all right, dear?" Mrs. Holloway asked, her voice sounding distant and distorted. "Ah, perhaps you should lie down." I tried to stand, but my legs felt like lead. The room spun around me, the faces of the other guests blurring into grotesque masks. I woke up with a start, my head pounding. No longer warm but predatory. The last thing I saw before darkness claimed me was Mrs. Holloway's smile. I was back in my room, though I had no memory of how I'd gotten there. The clock on the bedside table read 3:33 a.m. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I realized with a jolt that I wasn't alone. Shadowy figures stood around my bed, their features indistinct in the gloom. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I was paralyzed, unable to move or speak as the figures leaned closer. One of them spoke, its voice a dry whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "She's perfect. The ritual can begin." Panic surged through me, breaking whatever spell had held me immobile. I bolted upright, scrambling out of the bed and towards the door. But it was locked, the key nowhere in sight. The shadows advanced, their forms shifting and writhing in impossible ways. I pressed myself against the wall, desperately searching for a way out. That's when I saw it, a small trapdoor in the ceiling, almost hidden by the room's ornate molding. Without thinking, I grabbed the desk chair and climbed up, pushing at the trapdoor with all my strength. It gave way with a groan, and I pulled myself up into a dark, musty attic space. I could hear the shadows below, their whispers growing angry and insistent. I crawled through the darkness, cobwebs clinging to my face and arms, until I found another trapdoor. This one opened into a hallway I didn't recognize. The inn seemed to have transformed in the night. The hallways twisted and turned in ways that defied logic, and the paintings on the walls seemed to watch me as I ran past. I could hear chanting now coming from somewhere deep within the building. I turned a corner and found myself at the top of the main staircase. The front door was just below, my chance at escape, but as I started down the steps, I saw them. Mrs. Holloway, the gardener, and the other guests, standing in a circle in the foyer. They were wearing robes now, deep crimson with those strange symbols embroidered in gold. Mrs. Holloway looked up, her eyes meeting mine. The kindly innkeeper was gone, replaced by something ancient and hungry. "There you are, my dear," she said, her voice resonating with power. "We've been waiting for you. It's time to take your place in the circle." I was trapped. I turned to run back up the stairs, but the shadows were there, blocking my path. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice shaking. "What do you want from me?" The gardener stepped forward, his face twisted into a cool smile. "We need new blood, fresh energy to keep our little arrangement going. And you, my dear, are perfect." As they closed in around me, I realized with horror that the symbols on their robes were moving, slithering across the fabric like living things. The chanting grew louder, and I could feel a pressure building in the air, like the moment before a thunderstorm. In desperation, I lashed out, pushing past Mrs. Holloway and making a break for the door. But as my hand closed around the knob, a searing pain shot through my arm. I looked down to see one of those symbols burning itself into my skin. The door swung open, but instead of the gardens and the road beyond, there was only swirling darkness. I stood on the threshold, the chanting reaching a fever pitch behind me, the darkness beckoning before me. At that moment, I understood that I had a choice to make. I could surrender to whatever ritual they had planned, become a part of this twisted place. With one last look at the grotesque faces of my would-be captors, I made my choice. Or I could step into the unknown, facing whatever horrors lurked in that swirling void. I stepped forward, letting the darkness envelop me. I'd like to say that I escaped, that I found my way back to my normal life. But the truth is, I'm not sure where I am or what I've become. And sometimes, in quiet moments, I can still hear the chanting. Sometimes I catch glimpses of other places, other realities. All I know for certain is this: be careful where you choose to stay. Some inns cater to more than just weary travelers, and some vacations can last an eternity. The first thing I noticed when I entered my new apartment was the silence. Not the peaceful quiet of a well-insulated building, but an oppressive stillness that seemed to swallow every sound. My footsteps, usually echoing on hardwood floors, were muffled as if I were walking on cotton. Even the thud of my suitcase hitting the ground was oddly muted. I'd been thrilled to find this place, a spacious one-bedroom in the heart of the city, for a price that seemed too good to be true. As I stood in the entryway, a chill running down my spine despite the summer heat outside, I began to wonder if it was... "Get a grip, Sarah," I muttered to myself, my voice sounding strange in the quiet. "It's just an apartment." I began to unpack, trying to shake off the unease that had settled over me. The previous tenant had left some furniture behind: a battered couch, a rickety dining table, and a large antique mirror that dominated one wall of the living room. As I passed by it, I could have sworn I saw something move in its reflection, just at the edge of my vision. But when I turned to look, there was nothing there. That night I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional creak of settling wood that seemed far too loud in the stillness. Around 3 a.m., I heard it, a soft tapping like fingernails on glass. It seemed to be coming from the living room, heart pounding. I crept out of bed. The tapping grew louder as I approached the living room. In the dim light filtering through the curtains, I could see the source, the mirror. Something was moving inside it, a dark shape that didn't match my reflection. I froze, unable to look away as the shape grew more distinct. It was a face gaunt and pale, with eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness. A hand pressed against the glass from the other side. Long fingers splayed as if trying to push through. I screamed, the sound shockingly loud in the quiet apartment. The face in the mirror twisted into a grotesque smile, and then vanished, as quickly as it had appeared. I spent the rest of the night huddled in my bed, lights blazing, too terrified to sleep. When dawn finally broke, I convinced myself it had been a nightmare, a product of stress and an overactive imagination. But as the days passed, strange occurrences became impossible to ignore. Objects would move when I wasn't looking, always just slightly out of place. The tapping would come at night, sometimes from the mirror, sometimes from the walls or the windows, and always, there was that oppressive silence, as if the very air was holding its breath. I tried to leave, to break my lease, and find somewhere else to live. But every time I made plans to move out, something would go wrong. My car would break down, my bank account would mysteriously empty, potential new apartments would fall through at the last minute. It was as if the building itself was conspiring to keep me there. A week turned into a month, and I found myself growing accustomed to the strangeness. I avoided looking directly at the mirror, ignored the tapping at night, pretended not to notice when things weren't quite where I'd left them. I told myself I was adapting, but deep down, I knew I was slowly losing my grip on reality. It was on a Tuesday night that everything changed. I was cooking dinner, chopping vegetables with perhaps more force than necessary, when I cut my finger. A drop of blood fell to the floor, and the apartment seemed to shudder. The silence, an ever-present, suddenly broke. The lights flickered, and I could hear whispers coming from every corner of the room. I ran to the living room, drawn by an urge I couldn't explain. A low hum filled the air, growing louder by the second. Dozens of faces, all pale and gaunt, all wearing the same desperate expression. The mirror was vibrating, its surface rippling like water, and in its depths, I could see them. "Help us," they whispered, their voices a cacophony of pleading. "Free us." I stumbled backward, my mind reeling. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice shaking. "And what do you want?" One face pushed forward, becoming clearer than the rest. It was a woman, her eyes sunken and sad. "We are the ones who came before," she said, "trapped by the hunger of this place. It feeds on us, on our fear and despair. But you can end this." I shook my head, backing away. "I don't understand. How can I help you?" The woman's expression turned urgent. "The blood," she said. "Your blood is the key, willingly given. It can break the spell. Please, help us," her voice echoing strangely in the impossible space. "This diner sits at the crossroads of realities. We keep the balance, prevent the worlds from bleeding into each other. But our time is ending. We need a replacement. I shook my head, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. Why me? I'm nobody special. I'm just a waitress. The gone man laughed, a sound like grinding glass. You were drawn here for a reason, Sarah. You can feel the thinness of reality in this place. Furthermore, you have the potential to see beyond the veil. As he spoke, I began to see it. Glimpses of other worlds superimposed over our own. Creatures of impossible geometry drifting through the void. The true nature of the diner, our nexus point where countless realities intersected. No, I whispered, squeezing my eyes shut. This isn't real. It can't be. Oh, but it is, the woman said, her voice almost gentle. And now you have a choice to make. Join us. Take your place as a guardian. Or, she left the alternative unspoken, but I could feel the threat hanging in the air. I thought of Jake, of his mysterious disappearance, of all the other employees who had come and gone over the years, never to be seen again. What happens if I say no? I asked, already knowing the answer. The regulars exchanged glances, their black eyes glittering in the starlight. And you? Then we find someone else. Well, let's just say you won't be working the night shift anymore. I took a deep breath, weighing my options. On one hand, everything I knew about reality had just been shattered. The idea of becoming some interdimensional guardian was terrifying. But on the other hand, the alternative seemed far worse. If I agree, I said slowly, what exactly would I be doing? The woman smiled, seeming pleased by my question. You would join us in our vigil. Watch for signs of incursion from other realities. Maintain the balance, and occasionally guide lost souls back to where they belong. As she spoke, I saw flashes of what my life could become. Endless nights in the diner, watching the ebb and flow of realities. The power to peer into other worlds, to shape the very fabric of existence. It was overwhelming, but also strangely enticing. Okay, I heard myself say, as if from a great distance, I'll do it. The chanting resumed, louder this time. I felt a strange energy coursing through my body, rewriting my very essence. My vision blurred, and for a moment, I could see everything, every possible reality, every potential future. When it was over, I found myself back in the diner. Everything looked the same, and yet different. I could see the thin spots now, the places where realities bled into each other, and I understood my role in keeping them separate. The regulars, my new companions, nodded approvingly. Take your seat. Our vigil continues. Welcome, Sarah, the woman said. As I sat down at the corner table, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window. My eyes were black now, like theirs. I was no longer just Sarah, the waitress. I was a guardian of reality, a watcher at the crossroads. The bell above the door chimed, and a tired-looking man walked in. I smiled, knowing that to him, I was just another late-night customer. But I could see the truth now. I could see everything. And as I settled in for my eternal shift at the round-the-clock cafe, I couldn't help but wonder, how many other seemingly ordinary places held secrets like this? How thin is the veil between worlds? Really? But those were questions for another time. For now, I had a job to do, a reality to protect, and an endless supply of coffee to drink. The first red flag should have been the rent. $500 a month for a spacious room in a Victorian house, utilities included, in the heart of Boston. It was too good to be true, but I was a broke college student, desperate for a place to live, and Mr. Blackwood's kind smile and grandfatherly demeanor. I was a poor, poor man, and I was a poor man, and I was a poor, 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 poor man, and a poor Eve. Alright, how about we forget about it? Is this a good idea for me, or do I have to feel, or do I need to worry? Everything was going very bad, and then somewhere I kept listening to reasons necessitating a hard time, and I started wondering why things weren't going right. After 3 or 4 nights of feeling the same, the sensation of being watched when I was alone in my room. Strange scratching noises in the walls at night. I tried to rationalize it. Old houses make noises. But as the weeks went by, the incidents became harder to explain away. I was stressed from exams and imagining things. One night, I came home late from a study session to find all the furniture in my room rearranged. The heavy oak dresser that I could barely budge was now on the opposite wall. When I confronted Mr. Blackwood about it the next day, he just smiled that grandfatherly smile and said, "Oh my, you must have been very tired last night to not remember doing that yourself." But I knew I hadn't touched anything, just as I knew I hadn't written the strange symbols that began appearing on my mirror in the mornings, drawn in what looked disturbingly like dried blood. The other tenants were no help. They were all older, reclusive types, who rarely left their rooms. On the rare occasions I ran into one in the hallway, they would avert their eyes and hurry past as if afraid to be caught talking to me. It was Mara, the girl who lived in the room next to mine, who finally confirmed I wasn't going crazy. "You've noticed it too, haven't you?" she whispered one day as we passed on the stairs. Her eyes were wide, darting nervously towards Mr. Blackwood's closed office door. The wrongness of this place. I nodded, relief flooding through me at the realization that I wasn't alone in my fears. "What's going on here, Mara? What is this place?" She shook her head, her voice dropping even lower. "I don't know exactly, but I've been doing some research. This house, it has a history. People have been disappearing from here for decades. And Mr. Blackwood has been the landlord for far longer than should be possible." A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean?" I found newspaper clippings from the 1950s mentioning him by name. He looked exactly the same then, as he does now. Just before I could respond, we heard the creak of Mr. Blackwood's office door opening. Mara's eyes widened in panic. "Be careful, Alice," she hissed before darting up the stairs. That night, as I lay in bed, trying to process what Mara had told me, I heard it, a soft tapping on my door. Tap, 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 slow and deliberate. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice shaking. No answer. One more tapping. Tap, tap. I got up, my heart pounding, and approached the door. Through the keyhole I could see a shadow moving in the hallway. A tall, hunched figure that didn't look quite human. The tapping stopped. Then slowly, and I appeared at the keyhole. It wasn't me. Blackwood's kind blue eye. This was yellow, with a slitted pupil like a cat's. It blinked once, and I stumbled back with a scream. The door burst open, and Mr. Blackwood rushed in, looking concerned. "Alice, dear, what's wrong?" I heard you cry out. I looked from him to the open door, confused and terrified. There was something out there, and I saw it. He patted my hand soothingly. "Oh my, you must have been having a nightmare. There's nothing out there. See?" He gestured to the empty hallway, but as he turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of something yellow gleaming in his eyes. Just for a second, before they were back to their usual blue. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. I spent my time researching the house's history, confirming everything Mara had told me, and uncovering even more disturbing details. The house had been built in the 1800s, by a man rumored to be involved in occult practices. Over the years, dozens of tenants had vanished without a trace. And Mr. Blackwood, the more I looked, the more I found references to him throughout the decades. Always the same name, always the same grandfatherly appearance. It was impossible. Unless I decided to confront him, I couldn't live like this anymore, jumping at every shadow, doubting my own sanity. I marched down to his office, my hand raised to knock. When I heard voices from inside, "The girl is becoming troublesome," Mr. Blackwood was saying. "She's asking too many questions." "Then perhaps it's time," replied a voice I didn't recognize. It was deep and gravely with an odd echoing quality. "The stars are almost aligned. We need fresh blood for the ritual." I gasped, then clapped a hand over my mouth. The voices inside went silent. Then footsteps approaching the door. I ran, but it was too late. Up the stairs, down the hallway, fumbling with my key as I heard Mr. Blackwood calling my name in that kindly voice that now sent shivers of terror down my spine. My mind was racing. Ritual, fresh blood. I had to get out of here. I slammed my door shut, locking it, and pushing my dresser in front of it for good measure. I began throwing clothes into my backpack. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely zip it closed. That's when I noticed the mirror. The symbols were back, but this time they were moving, rearranging themselves before my eyes. As I watched, horrified and transfixed, they formed words I could understand. The dresser blocking my door suddenly flew across the room. Too late. Mr. Blackwood stood in the doorway, as if thrown by an invisible hand. But he didn't look grandfatherly anymore. His eyes were fully yellow now, his smile revealing teeth that were far too sharp. Now, Alice, he said, his voice overlaid with that deep, gravelly tone. I'd heard in his office, "There's no need to rush off. You've been chosen for a great honor." Their eyes were all glowing yellow, gathering in the hallway. Behind him, I could see the other tenants, their bodies shifting and changing into forms that were no longer human. I backed up against the wall. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. This couldn't be happening. It had to be a nightmare. But as Mr. Blackwood advanced, footprints in the dust leading from the front door and up the stairs. They weren't ours. "Run," Mark said. We bolted down the stairs and out the front door. His voice was tight with fear, not daring to look back. The storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape transformed by snow. Our car was buried under a thick white blanket. I gasped, fumbling for my phone. Forget the car. We need to call for help. But as I pulled out my phone, I froze. The screen showed the date, 3 days later than it should have been. We'd been in the lodge for 3 days. Not one night. A noise from inside the lodge made us both jump. Without a word, we started running, plowing through the deep snow towards the main road. We were picked up an hour later by a passing snowplow. The driver looked at us strangely when we told him where we'd been. "A Whispering Pines Lodge," he said, frowning. "That place burned down years ago. There's nothing left but ruins." Mark and I exchanged horrified glances. What had we experienced? Where had we really been for those missing days? As we drove away, I looked back one last time. Through the trees, I could just make out the lodge, standing tall and imposing against the snow-covered mountains. And in one of the upper windows, I saw a figure watching us leave. I blinked, and it was gone. What would the charred ruins the snowplow driver had described? To this day, I don't know what happened to us at Whispering Pines Lodge, but sometimes on cold winter nights, when the wind howls outside my window, I swear I can hear distant whispers calling me back to that impossible place where time stands still and the dead walk among the living. And I know, with a certainty that chills me to my core, that someday, somehow, you'll find myself back there. Because some places, once they've claimed you, never really let you go. The GPS blinked out just as I turned onto the unmarked dirt road. One moment, it was confidently guiding me through the winding back roads of rural Pennsylvania. And the next, nothing. Static filled the screen. Then it went dark. I tapped it frustratedly, but the device remained stubbornly lifeless. "Great," I muttered, peering through the windshield at the dense forest surrounding me. The late afternoon sun filtered weakly through the trees, casting long shadows across the narrow road. I was already running late for my cousin's wedding, and now this. I considered turning back, but the thought of retracing the last hour of complicated turns was daunting. Surely this road had to lead somewhere. I pressed on, hoping to find a town or at least someone who could point me in the right direction. The trees grew thicker as I drove, their branches forming a canopy that blocked out most of the fading daylight. An uneasy feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. Something about this place felt off. The forest was too quiet, devoid of the usual chirping of birds or rustling of small animals. Just as I was about to give up and turn around, the trees suddenly parted, revealing a small town nestled in a clearing. Relief washed over me as I pulled onto the main street, lined with quaint storefronts that looked like they belonged in another century. A few people milled about on the sidewalks, all dressed in oddly old-fashioned clothing. They turned to stare as I drove past. Their expressions are a mixture of curiosity and... was that fear? I parked in front of what looked like a general store and stepped out of the car, stretching my legs. The air felt different here, heavier somehow, with a faint metallic tang that made me wrinkle my nose. "Excuse me," I called out to an elderly man sweeping the storefront. "Could you tell me where I am? My GPS stopped working, and I'm a bit lost." The man froze, his broom clattering to the ground. He stared at me with wide, frightened eyes before hurrying inside the store, slamming the door behind him. Bewildered, I turned to see a small group of townspeople had gathered, watching me intently. Their gazes made my skin crawl. A woman stepped forward, her long skirts swishing against the dusty road. "Welcome to Millbrook," she said. Her voice carried a strange accent I couldn't place. "We don't get many visitors here," trying to keep my tone light despite the growing sense of unease. "I can see that," I replied. "I'm just passing through. Could you point me towards the highway? I'm trying to get to Pittsburgh." The woman's brow furrowed. "Pittsburgh? I'm afraid I don't know of such a place, but you're welcome to stay here in Millbrook. We always have room for one more." Alarm bells were ringing in my head now. How could she not know Pittsburgh? And the way she said always have room for one more. It sent a chill down my spine. "That's very kind," I said, backing towards my car. "But I really should be going. My family's expecting me." As I reached for the door handle, I felt a hand on my arm. A man had appeared beside me, his grip unnaturally strong. "There's no need to rush off. Now, he said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Why don't you join us for dinner? We're always eager to hear news from the outside world." I tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. "Please," I said, my voice shaking. "I need to leave." The crowd had grown larger now, pressing in around me. Their faces were a mix of hunger and anticipation, like predators cornering their prey. Panic surged through me. I wrenched my arm free and dove into my car, fumbling with the keys. The engine roared to life, and I slammed it into reverse, tires squealing as I backed away from the advancing crowd. I spun the car around and floored it, racing back the way I'd come. In my rearview mirror, I could see the townspeople flooding into the street, their faces twisted with rage. The forest seemed to close in around me as I sped down the dirt road, branches scraping against the sides of my car. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. What the hell had just happened? I drove for what felt like hours, the scenery never changing. The same trees, the same bends in the road. It was as if I was driving in circles. Darkness had fallen completely now. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. I moved from city to city, taking odd jobs and sleeping in cheap motels. I tried to convince myself that they'd given up, always looking over my shoulder, always waiting for them to find me, that I was no longer a threat, but deep down I knew better. A corporation willing to kill, that my past finally caught up with me to protect its secrets. Wouldn't just let a witness walk away. It was in a small town in the Midwest. Nearly a year after that fateful night, I was working as a dishwasher in a local diner, keeping my head down. In the next town, the bell above the door jingled, and I glanced up out of habit. My heart stopped. There, scanning the room, with predatory eyes, was the woman I'd heard that night at Pinnacle Industries. Our eyes met, and in that instant, I knew my time was up. I bolted for the back door, ignoring the shouts of my confused coworkers. As I burst into the alley behind the diner, I heard the woman's cold voice. She was running. "Take him alive if you can, but don't let him get away." I ran like I'd never run before, my feet pounding the pavement as I weaved through back alleys and side streets, but they were always one step behind, no matter how many turns I took. Just when I thought my lungs would burst, or how fast I ran, I saw it, a bus station, its neon open sign, a beacon of hope in the gathering dusk. I pushed myself harder before they caught up. I burst through the doors and startling the bored-looking ticket agents. "One ticket," I gasped, slamming all the money I had onto the counter. "Anywhere. The next bus out, please." The agent blinked at me in surprise, but began typing on her computer. "There's a bus leaving for Chicago in 5 minutes." She said. "He'll take it," I said, snatching the ticket from her hand. I ran to the platform as the bus was preparing to depart. As I climbed aboard, I saw my pursuers enter the station, their eyes scanning the crowd. The doors closed, and the bus pulled away. I sank into a seat, my heart is pounding. I'd bought myself some time, but I knew this was far from over. As the bus merged onto the highway, carrying me towards yet another uncertain future, I couldn't help but laugh at the bitter irony. I had been a simple night janitor, all those months ago, invisible to the world of corporate power and corruption. Now I was a man with no name, no home, and a target on my back. I leaned my head against the cool glass of the window, watching the familiar landscape of my life. disappear into the rearview mirror. I didn't know where this road would lead, but I knew one thing for certain: there was no going back. The night I picked up that mop at Pinnacle Industry was the night my old life ended, and this endless chase began. As the miles ticked by, I closed my eyes, allowing myself a moment of rest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers, but for now, on this bus, full of strangers, I was just another faceless traveler. And in that anonymity, I found a small measure of peace. The chase would resume soon enough, but for now, I was safe. For now, I could breathe, and in this world of shadows and secrets, that was more than I could have hoped for. The keycard slid smoothly into the slot, and the light flashed green. I pushed open the heavy door of room 114, wheeling my small suitcase behind me. The majestic hotel lived up to its name, all gleaming marble and plush carpets. But as I stepped into my room, a chill ran down my spine. That had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Everything looked perfect. Crisp white sheets on the king-size bed, a stunning view of the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. Yet something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but the air seemed thick, almost oppressive. I shook my head, chiding myself for being paranoid. It had been a long day of travel, and I was tired. A good night's sleep was all I needed. As I unpacked, I noticed small oddities. The TV remote was on the left side, and now on the nightstand. A glass I was sure I'd left on the desk of the bed, though I distinctly remembered putting it on the right when I first came in. Little things, easy to dismiss, but unsettling nonetheless. I was here on business, a week-long conference. That promised to be as dull as it was necessary. I'd chosen the Majestic for its proximity to the convention center and its stellar reviews. Now, as the sun set and shadows crept across the room, I was beginning to regret my choice. Sleep came fitfully that night. Strange noises kept waking me, scratching sounds from inside the walls, whispers that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Each time I jolted awake, heart racing. The room seemed different, furniture slightly out of place, shadows that didn't quite match the objects casting them. By morning I was exhausted and on edge, but in the harsh light of day, my fears seemed silly. Old hotels made noises, housekeeping probably, moved things while cleaning. There had to be logical explanations. The conference was as mind-numbing as expected, but I welcomed the distraction. It wasn't until I returned to my room that evening the strangeness resumed. The moment I opened the door, I knew someone or something. You'd never make it in the dark. Oh, my dear, there's no phone here, and the ranger station, miles away. She stepped back, gesturing inside. Come in, come in. Can stay the night and well, sort you out in the morning. I hesitated, torn between my fear of this strange woman and my fear of spending it, night alone in the increasingly dark and cold forest. In the end, practicality won out. I stepped inside. The interior of the cabin was odd. It was a single room, sparsely furnished with ancient-looking pieces that seemed to belong in a museum, but scattered among the antiques were incongruous items. Digital alarm clock, modern laptop, things that looked wildly out of place in this rustic setting, and everywhere, covering every surface, were mirrors of all shapes and sizes, from tiny hand mirrors to full length. Ones leaning against the walls, they reflected on the room, back at me from every angle, creating a dizzying kaleidoscopic effect. Sit, the old woman said, ushering me to a rickety chair. You'll make us some tea. As she was busy, herself at an old wood stove, I tried to gather my thoughts. Something about this place, about her, it felt wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on what exactly was causing my unease. She returned with 2 steaming mugs. Handing one to me, the liquid inside was dark, almost black, with an oily taste. Sheen on the surface. It smelled strange, not like any tea I'd ever encountered. Drink up, she said, her pale eyes boring into mine, or it will Warm you right up. I raised the mug to my lips, more out of politeness than any desire to actually drink the concoction. But as the liquid touched my tongue, a wave of dizziness washed over me. The room began to spin, the reflections in the mirrors blurring and swirling. What did you give me? My legs felt like lead, and the edges of my vision were growing dark. I slurred, struggling to stand. The old woman's face swam before me. Her features are shifting and changing. One moment she was ancient, the next young and beautiful. And all, just a little. Then something, not human. Something to help you sleep, my dear, she said, her voice echoing strangely. You'll need it. Your rest for what's to come. I tried to fight the encroaching darkness, but it was a losing battle. The last thing I saw before unconsciousness took me, own reflection in one of the mirrors. But it wasn't me. Not really. The face looking back was older, gaunt, with eyes that held a lifetime of terror. I woke up with a start, my head pounding. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was, or how I'd gotten there. Then it all came flooding back. The hike, getting lost, the strange cabin, the old woman, the tea. I sat up, realizing I was on a narrow cot in a corner of the cabin. Sunlight streamed through the windows, dust motes dancing in the beams. The old woman was nowhere to be seen. I stood on shaky legs, my body feeling oddly stiff, as if I'd slept for far longer than one night. I made my way to the door, desperate to leave this place and find my way back to civilization. But when I stepped outside, my heart nearly stopped. The forest was wrong. The trees were taller, older, their branches twisted into unnatural shapes. The very air felt different, heavier somehow, charged with an energy I couldn't explain. I spun around, intending to grab my backpack and run, only to freeze in shock. The cabin was gone. In its place stood a circle of standing stones, ancient and weathered, covered in strange symbols that seemed to writhe and move when I wasn't looking directly at them. No, I whispered, backing away. This is impossible. Oh, but it is, came a familiar, raspy voice. The old woman stepped out behind one of the stones, but she wasn't old anymore. A moment. What have you done to me? She was ageless, her form shifting and changing as I watched, never settling on one appearance for more than I demanded. My voice was shaking. Where am I? She laughed. The sound like breaking glass. You are exactly where you were before, my dear. Just a little further along. I don't understand, I said, panic rising in my throat. Time is a funny thing, she said, circling me slowly. So rigid for most, but so very fluid for some.
You taken a little trip?
That's all. About 50 years or so into the future. I shook my head, refusing to believe it. That's impossible. You're insane. I need to leave to get home. Her eyes flashed, suddenly cold and hard. Home. Oh, my sweet summer child. This is your home now, just as it has been for the past 5 decades. As she spoke, memories began to flood. My mind, memories of years spent in that cabin, of countless hikers lured in, of rituals performed in this very stone circle. Memories of learning secrets no human was meant to know, of extending my own life at the cost of others. I saw my reflection in a pool of water at my feet, and a strangled cry escaped me. Lips, the face looking back at me was my own, but aged, worn, with eyes that held the weight of unspeakable. I went to a rave in an abandoned factory. It burned down and I saw something terrifying in the fire. So my friend Liam gives me a call, tells me that he managed to get us tickets to one of those pop-up raves that's hosted in a weird location like a sewer or warehouse or something. This one happened to be in an old abandoned textile factory near the edge of the city. Sounds sketchy, I know, but there's actually a good bit of funding and effort that goes into these things. This is to say that the final venue ends up being something passable, a level above an outright safety hazard. Honestly, I'd always thought these things were a bit lame, pretentious even. but I had nothing else going on that night, so I thought, why the hell not? We get there at around midnight, and it turns out to be a fucking blast for as long as it lasts. 2 a.m. rolls around and I'm drunk and extremely high in the bathroom. I'm sitting on the toilet scrolling through Instagram Reels when the screaming starts, sounds of mass panic. Then I start to smell the smoke and sober up enough to understand what's happening. I rush out of the bathroom into a mob of frenzied bodies, the smoke now heavy enough to make my eyes water. Try to find the exit, but it's sheer chaos and I'm disoriented as hell. People keep running into me, and at some point I'm knocked flat on my ass, forced to crawl around until I manage to escape the crowd. At which point I found myself kneeling in front of the makeshift stage, something now completely engulfed in flames. And there I saw him. A strange, inexplicable figure standing right in the midst of the fire. A young dude, maybe mid-20s. Lanky frame, pale skin, dark and wild hair, bulging, fish-like eyes. He was wearing a t-shirt and jeans, holding a black camcorder up to his face, and showing absolutely no reaction to the heat. Even his clothes weren't burning up. He was just standing there and filming, calm as anybody could ever be. Filming me specifically. I guess it was hard to tell, but I'm pretty sure he was pointing the camera directly at me. I stared at him for what felt like no longer than a few seconds before the air had grown too suffocating to deal with. Then I turned, ran like hell out of there. I don't really remember making it outside, but I do remember collapsing on the grass and hacking up my lungs, my vision reduced to a field of blotted orange shapes as concerned but disembodied voices called out, asking if I was okay. Which I wasn't. At least not right then. I passed out shortly after and then woke up in an ambulance, an EMT hovering above me. Liam was also there. I could see the relief in his eyes, which just as quickly turned into anger. He sighed. "Fucking hell, dude," he said. "Glad you're okay, but what the fuck were you doing?" I shook my head. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what the hell were you doing in there for so long? Did you fall down and twist your ankle or something?" "What?" I responded. "No, I just got caught up with the crowd." Liam shook his head again. "What? That's not possible, dude." "Why the hell not?" I was genuinely confused what he was trying to get at here. "Because you were the last one out." I stared at him. "What do you mean?" "You came out like 5 minutes after everybody else did. Even the fucking DJ got out before you." "What?" I couldn't see how that was possible, but hardly had he energy to argue it. "What were you doing in there?" he asked me again. I shrugged. "Maybe I fell," I said. "Hit my head or something." By the time that the ambulance had pulled up to the hospital, I was coherent enough to refuse any further treatment. My insurance wouldn't have covered enough for it to be worth it. In any case, I felt fine enough. Lungs were still stinging a bit, but not so bad. Not worth the hassle. For the first few nights after the incident, the paranoia was something else. My head was being flooded with these fucked up thoughts. Like, what if that guy knew where I lived? What if he was following me home at night? What if he was somewhere in my apartment right now, filming me through a crack in my closet or something? A hellish state of mind. Sleep was like pulling teeth, and the little that I managed to get was invaded by nightmares so vivid and horrific that it was nearly euphoric to wake up and realize they hadn't actually happened. So I took to smoking and drinking before bed. I'm sure there's better methods out there, but I just didn't want to deal with this shit and wanted a quick fix before I started going insane. And it kind of worked. The paranoia began to ease up after a week, and sleep was starting to come in small increments, even without the liquor, though I was still smoking in order to stave off the nightmares. Another week and I was starting to forget about it. It was just a fucked up night. The smoke caused some hallucinations. I almost died, but I didn't. Now I'm fine. It's all good. Continuing to think about it is a non-value added activity. Just forget about it and move on. Which I might have been able to do if I hadn't run into Cindy. Now I'd never met or seen Cindy ever before, so you can bet it was a bit of a shock when this tall brunette fitness model type comes over and sits beside me on the park bench while I'm staring at trees sipping my Americano. She looked scared, worried, a mix of both. "You don't remember me, do you?" she asked me. I shook my head. "I don't think so. Where would we have met?" She sighed, as if me saying that had just confirmed something she really didn't want to hear. "The factory," she told me. I stared at her. Suddenly, every awful feeling was funneling back into my psyche at once. It was hard to say anything in that moment, but she seemed to be waiting pretty patiently for an answer, and so I forced one out. "You mean the rave?" "Yeah, I was there." Crazy shit, huh? Are you uncomfortable talking about it after what happened to you? Obviously I was, but I lied. No, I told her. Not at all. Wait, what do you mean? What happened to me? Well, I tried dragging you out that night. I really did. Everybody else was running away, but you were just kneeling there, kneeling in front of the stage, and you weren't moving. She paused, and I nodded at her to continue. You were staring at something, staring right into the fire, like you were in a trance or something. I tried dragging you away. I really did, but you wouldn't budge. It almost felt like you were attached to the floor. It was kind of freaky. How long was I there for? I'm not sure. At least like half a minute. I didn't stick around for that long, sorry. And what was I staring at? What? In the fire. What was I looking at? She shook her head. I don't know. I didn't check. The flames were hurting my eyes. I nodded slowly. This was a lot to process, and we stayed silent for a long time. Are you okay? She asked after a while. Were you injured at all? Not really, I told her. I looked at the ground and then felt her hand on my leg. It's a relief, to see you. I looked up and her face was a lot closer to mine. That you made it out, that you're okay. I tried to smile and then began stumbling over my words. Yeah, I guess. She laughed and then so did I. She then told me to come up to her apartment later that evening. Said she'd treat me to some DoorDash. Of course I accepted. And even if a red flag had been visible in that moment, I had been rendered colorblind. So I go home, take a shower, brush my teeth, do what's necessary to give myself a fighting chance. Not that I was really expecting anything. I just assumed that she felt guilty about it all, and I'm also not one to pass up a free meal. I get over there at around 7 and she invites me in with this huge smile on her face, and I can see 2 large greasy boxes of fried chicken on the counter. We hug. She grabs a couple of beers out of her fridge, and then we take all the food and drink over to the couch. We start watching Dune Part 2, but I'm hardly paying attention to it. Too many other things on my mind. We finish Dune, and then, to my surprise, she pulls out a VHS. You like horror movies? She asks me. Generally speaking, I do, but I still wasn't far removed enough from the incident to be terribly excited about the prospect of watching one, which of course I didn't mention to her. I just nodded. Hell yeah, I love them. She stood up and then walked over the television and then reached behind it and pulled out a VCR. The thing looked fucking ancient, and from what I could tell, didn't have any indication of any sort of brand on it at all. She blew a thick layer of dust off the top of it, and then went about setting it up. She then grabbed the VHS and slid it in before sitting back on the couch, resting her head on my shoulder. In any other situation, I would have been ecstatic, but right then and there I couldn't be. The mood had shifted in a way that I really didn't like, for reasons that I couldn't fully understand. The television turned on, staying on a black screen for the better part of a minute before plain white text flashed across the screen. Part 1. The opening scene was simply a shot of an empty field at night. There were some trees to the left, what looked like an abandoned farmhouse in the distance, and it went on for an insane amount of time. 10, maybe 15 minutes of this one static shot. It could have been a picture had the wind not moved the grass and leaves every so often. I made a comment addressing how strange it was. Cindy didn't respond. Finally, it cut to another scene. It looked like found footage of somebody walking through a dark forest, but unlike most found footage movies, you couldn't hear the breaths of whoever was holding the camera. They spent about 10 minutes walking through the woods until all of the trees and foliage had cleared out. Now the camera was focusing on a building. A factory. The factory. I didn't really react when I first saw it. There was no way. It couldn't have been the same one. How the fuck could it have been? Suddenly I became hyper aware of everything around me. The sounds and smells in the apartment, Cindy's grip on my bicep, any shapes lurking in the corner of my vision. The cameraman continued towards the factory, and once he made his way inside, there was no more debating it. This was absolutely the same place. I watched as they walked up to the stage, began pouring gasoline all over it, and then I could watch no longer. I ripped my arm away from Cindy and practically leapt off the couch. What the hell are you showing me? I asked her. She had this amused look on her face, as if she were surprised it took so long for me to finally snap. What do you mean? She said, a mocking undertone in her voice. I thought you liked horror movies? Where the hell did you get this tape from? She smiled, shook her head. I just had it, silly. I've always had it. What in the fuck is that supposed to mean? Her face dropped. The creepy smile wiped away, now replaced by something colder. Sit back down, she said. Your scene's coming up soon. Yeah, fuck that. I turned and bolted for the door, and then down the hallway and down the stairs, then all the way back to my own building. Catch my breath in the elevator, then check to see that my front door is still locked, because now the paranoia is invading every inch of my senses, then crack open a beer and pace around the living room. There was no way that just happened, I'm telling myself. But this is not a nightmare. I'm not asleep. But how can I really be sure of that? Dreams feel real in the moment, don't they? Then I remember the time trick and check my phone and see that it's around 11 p.m. 11 p.m. I'm aware of it. I'm not asleep. The cops. I start telling myself, call the cops. But what if they think I'm crazy? What am I supposed to tell them? I got to the fridge and opened another beer. Sip it and try to relax. Get my thoughts together. That tape is evidence of a crime. She's in possession of evidence of a crime. I have a friend who's a cop, Jack, so I call him, explain what happened, gave him Cindy's address. He said he'd treat it as an anonymous tip and that he'd investigate it, give me an update on what he finds. This makes feel a bit better, and I crawl into bed, watch some bullshit videos on my phone until I finally manage to pass out. When I woke up, the sun was out, and I was coated in sweat, my eyes darting across the bedroom, searching for something that may or may not have been there. A nightmare, I was assuming. Something horrible that I thankfully couldn't remember. I grabbed my phone, opened it up to see a missed call, and a text from Jack. That address you gave me doesn't exist. You sure you gave me the right one? I text him back. I might not have. Which address did you look into? He replied within a few minutes, and then I traced his response to the address that Cindy had written down for me. Exact same thing. Then I gave Jack a call, asked him to elaborate further. I don't know what to tell you, dude. That address doesn't exist, he told me. There's some out there that are kinda close to it, but they're in different countries. I have no idea where you went that night. I couldn't really believe what I was hearing, so I confirmed it for myself. He was right. No address matching it, at least nowhere even remotely nearby. Then I tried remembering how I even got there last night, and I couldn't do it. I mean, I really couldn't. I couldn't remember searching up directions or walking there or even leaving my apartment. I told Jack that I'd talk to him later and hung up. Only one explanation for this shit. I'm going insane. I inhaled too much smoke that night, and now I'm going through some kind of psychosis. Cindy wasn't real. The cameraman wasn't real. I'm really just losing my fucking marbles. At least this is what I want to believe. So I went about looking for a psychiatrist in my area, and then booked a consultation with one that had decent enough reviews. I'm headed there later today. I'll provide an update when I can. Hopefully with good news. I think the hide behind is real. I just don't think it's what we thought. I grew up hearing stories about the hide behind. You probably did too. The thing that lives in the woods, always just out of sight. It hides when you look, follows when you turn your back. People used to say it snatched loggers, hikers, hunters, always from behind, always without a sound. It was just a campfire story to me, until 2 weeks ago. I was clearing some old trails behind my grandfather's property in northern Maine. He died last fall, left the land to me, a patch of dense, silent forest nobody in the family really wanted. I figured I could clean it up, maybe sell it to some off-grid survival type. The woods felt wrong almost immediately. It wasn't just the quiet, it was a layered silence, like every sound was being swallowed before it could reach me. The crack of a branch under my boot barely echoed. Even the wind felt muted, like it was holding its breath. About an hour in, I started noticing little things. Tools I knew I'd put down would vanish if I turned away for even a second. The little trail markers I tied to the trees with bright orange tape kept disappearing behind me. And sometimes only when I wasn't looking directly, I'd feel something slip from tree to tree. Fast, silent, always in my peripheral vision. I thought I was just being paranoid. Then I found the shack. It wasn't on any map, just a small structure of rotting wood tucked into a grove of black pines. No windows, no chimney, the door barely hanging on its hinges. I should have turned back, but the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and not from fear. It felt like a dare, like something wanted me to come closer. Inside was a single room, dirt floor, collapsed roof, and a pile of bones in the center. Some human, some not. All broken and twisted like they'd been bent backward before death. There were carvings on the walls, hundreds of them, rough shapes gouged deep into the wood with something sharp. Not words, not pictures, just eye shapes, staring, crowded together until the walls looked like skin covered in bulging tumors. That's when I heard it, the breathing. Shallow, ragged, right behind me. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Something in my gut screamed that if I turned around, if I acknowledged it, it would be real. So I stepped backward. Slowly, one foot, then the other. Out the door, into the clearing. The breathing followed, closer. I could feel a long cold exhale brushing the back of my neck. I ran. Branches clawed at my clothes, the underbrush grabbed at my boots, but I didn't stop until I saw the rusted frame of my truck between the trees. The breathing never stopped. I slammed the door, locked it, and peeled out onto the rutted trail. Didn't look back once. But here's the thing. I know it followed me home. At first it was just little things again. Footsteps in the hallway at night when I was alone. Cabinet doors left open after I swore I closed them. Reflections in the TV screen when it was off. Shapes moving in the background. Last night though, I saw it. Not fully. Not straight on. I was brushing my teeth, leaned down to spit in the sink, and when I looked up, there was something crouched just behind my left shoulder. Long jointed limbs. No face, just skin pulled tight over where a face should been. And the worst part, it wasn't hiding. It was waiting. I didn't sleep after that. I sat up in bed, every light in the house on, trying to convince myself it was a trick of the mirror, a hallucination, anything but what I knew it was. But sometime around 3 a.m., I started noticing distortions. First, it was the walls. They seemed too far away. Like the room was stretching when I wasn't looking, the corners retreating into shadows that shouldn't exist. Then the sound started. I'd hear the front door creak open, the soft pad of footsteps on the hardwood. I'd rush to check. Nothing. I'd swear I heard the shower turn on by itself. It'd fling the curtain back, dry. At some point, I stopped trusting my own eyes. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of my own reflection in a window, and it wouldn't move in sync with me. It would lag behind by a second, like it was deciding whether to follow. Other times I'd catch a glimpse of something crouched inside the walls, pressing against the drywall like it was made of wet paper, skin stretching taut, fingers too long, and too many joints bending the wrong way. Always just for a blink. Always gone when I turned my full attention to it. The worst part was the sound though. That breathing. It was getting bolder. Not just behind me anymore. Above me. Below. Inside the vents. The closet. The crawl space. Under the house. A low, wet rasp. Like something trying to learn how to breathe human air. By the 5th day, reality just stopped making sense. I'd walk into the kitchen to find all the drawers pulled out, contents dumped on the floor, only to blink and see everything back in place. I'd reach for my phone and feel the cold, clammy touch of something else wrap around my fingers before vanishing. Voices whispered my name from inside the walls, getting the pronunciation wrong, twisting it like it was tasting the sound. And still the breathing. Always the breathing. I stopped leaving the house. I stopped answering texts, calls, emails. People think I'm sick, depressed, crazy. Maybe I am. But I know the truth. The hide behind isn't just a creature. It's a parasite. It doesn't just hide, it hollows you out from the inside, bends your senses, warps your reality, until you're not sure what's real anymore. Until you're so fractured, you don't even try to fight back. And then it steps in. It wears you like a puppet. You become the next reflection lagging behind. The next whisper in the walls. The next breathing in the dark. I think that's why the old stories never really explain what happens to the victims. Because once it takes you, you're not missing. You're just something else. I knew I couldn't survive like this. I didn't even feel fully human anymore. More like a puppet on broken strings, twitching through a life that wasn't mine. So I made a plan. If it was tied to the house, to the shack, the woods, the walls, maybe I could sever it. Maybe I could burn it out. I soaked the place in gasoline. Every room, every inch of sagging floorboards, rotting drywall, stained carpets. The canister was almost empty when I paused at the front door, lighter trembling in my hand. The breathing was so loud now, it wasn't even pretending anymore. It filled the air like a second heartbeat. I flicked the lighter. The flame danced, tiny and weak against the heavy dark pressing in. I could feel it behind me, close enough that the air grew wet and cold against the back of my neck. But I didn't turn around. I just dropped the lighter. The fire caught fast. It raced up the walls in a living, howling bloom. Smoke filled my lungs, my eyes, but I forced myself through it, stumbling outside into the cold night. I didn't look back until I was halfway down the overgrown drive. The house was an inferno, roof collapsing inward, windows bursting one by one. The trees around it caught too, sparks spiraling up into the black sky. For a moment, just a moment, I thought I saw something in the flames. Not one thing, many. Shapes squirming just beneath the surface of the fire, writhing against each other like worms in a corpse. Some tall, some bent, some crawling. All of them wrong, and all of them watching me. I didn't stop running until I hit asphalt. I spent the night in my truck, parked at the edge of town under a streetlight that buzzed and flickered like it was struggling to stay alive. And for a while I thought maybe it worked. Maybe I burned it out. Maybe I was free. But now I'm not so sure. When I close my eyes, I can still hear it. The breathing. Not behind me anymore. All around. The light in my truck flickers more than it stays steady. Sometimes, in the brief moments of darkness between blinks, I catch glimpses. Something hunched just outside the window, or pressed against the glass, or crouched on the ceiling above me. Always gone when the light comes back. Always a little closer. I think burning the house didn't destroy it. I think it set it free. And it's not just me anymore. If you're reading this, if you feel the hairs on your arms stand up, if you hear breathing where there shouldn't be any, if you think for even a second that something just moved in the corner of your eye, don't turn around. Don't look. It's already there. There's something seriously wrong with the farms in Ireland. Every summer when I was a child, my family would visit our relatives in the northwest of Ireland, in a rural, low-populated region. Leaving our home in England, we would road trip through Scotland before taking a ferry across the Irish Sea. Driving a further 3 hours through the last frontier of the United Kingdom, my two older brothers and I would know when we were close to our relative's farm, because the country roads would suddenly turn bumpy as hell. The northwest of Ireland is a breathtaking part of the country. Its Atlantic coastway is wild and rugged, with pastoral green hills and misty mountains. The villages are very traditional, surrounded by numerous farms, cow and sheep fields. My family and I would always stay at my grandmother's farmhouse, which stands out a mile away due to its bright red painted coating. These relatives are from my mother's side, and although the Northwest and even the rest of Ireland for that matter is very sparsely populated, my mother's family is extremely large. She has a dozen siblings, which was always mind-blowing to me, and what's more, I have so many cousins, I've yet to meet them all. I always enjoyed these summer holidays on the farm, where I would spend every day playing around the grounds and feeding the different farm animals. Although I usually played with my two older brothers on the farm, by the time I was 12 they were too old to play with me and would rather go round to one of our cousins' houses nearby to either ride dirt bikes or play video games. So I was mostly stuck on the farm by myself. Luckily, I had one cousin, Grain, who lived close by and was around my age. Grain was a tomboy, and so we more or less liked the same activities. I absolutely loved it here, and so did my brothers and my dad. In fact, we loved the northwest of Ireland so much, we even talked about moving here. But for some strange reason, although my mom was always missing her family, she was dead against any ideas of relocating. Whenever we asked her why, she would always have a different answer. There weren't enough jobs, it's too remote, and so on. But unfortunately for my mom, we always left the family decisions to a majority vote, and so, if the 4 out of 5 of us wanted to relocate to the northwest of Ireland, we were going to. On one of these summer evenings on the farm, and having neither my brothers or Grain to play with, my Uncle Dave, who ran the family farm, asked me if I'd like to come with him to see a baby calf being born on one of the nearby farms. Having never seen a newborn calf before, I enthusiastically agreed to tag along. Driving for 10 minutes down the bumpy country road, we pull outside the entrance of a rather large cow field, where, waiting for my Uncle Dave, were 3 other farmers. Knowing how big my Irish family was, I assumed I was probably related to these men too. Getting out of the car, these 3 farmers stare instantly at me, a appearing both shocked and angry. Striding up to my Uncle Dave, one of the farmers yells at him, "What the hell's this Wayne doing here?" Taken back a little by the hostility, I then hear my Uncle Dave reply, "He needs to know, you know as well as I do, they can't move here." Feeling rather uncomfortable by this confrontation, I was now somewhat confused. What do I need to know? And more importantly, why can't we move here? Before I can turn to Uncle Dave to ask him, the four men quickly halt their bickering and enter through the field gate entrance. Following the men into the cow field, the late evening had turned dark by now, and not wanting to ruin my good trainers by stepping in any cow paths, I walked very cautiously and slowly, so slow in fact, I'd gotten separated from my uncle's group. Trying to follow the voices through the darkness and thick grass, I suddenly stop in my tracks, because in front of me, staring back with unblinking eyes, was a very large cow, so large, I at first mistook it for a bull. In the past, my Uncle Dave had warned me not to play in the cow fields because if cows are with their calves, they may charge at you. Seeing this huge cow staring stonewall at me, I really was quite terrified, because already knowing how freakishly fast cows can be, I knew if it charged at me, there was little chance I would outrun it. Thankfully, the cow stayed exactly where it was, before losing interest in me and moving on. I know it sounds ridiculous talking about my terrifying encounter with a cow, but I was a city boy after all. Although I regularly fed the cows on the family farm, these animals still felt somewhat alien to me, even after all these years. Rushing off my close encounter, I continue to try and find my Uncle Dave. I eventually found them on the far side of the field's corner. Approaching my uncle's group, I then see they're not alone. Standing by them were 3 more men and a woman, all dressed in farmers' clothing, but surprisingly my cousin Grain was also with them. I go over to Grain to say hello, but she didn't even seem to realize I was there. She was too busy staring over at something behind the group of farmers, curious as to what Grain was looking at. I move around to get a better look, and what I see is another cow, just a regular red cow laying down on the grass. Getting out my phone to turn on the flashlight, I quickly realized this must be the cow that was giving birth. Its stomach was swollen, and there were patches of blood stained on the grass around it. But then I saw something else. On the other side of this red cow, nestled in the grass beneath the bushes, was the calf, and rather sadly, it was stillborn. But what greatly concerned me wasn't that this calf was dead. What concerned me was its appearance. Although the calf's head was covered in red, slimy fur, the rest of it wasn't. The rest of it didn't have any fur at all, just skin. And what made every single fiber of my body crawl was that this calf's body, its brittle, infant body, it belonged to a human, curled up into a fetal position. Its head was indeed that of a calf, but what I should have been seeing as 2 front and hind legs were instead 2 human arms and legs, no longer or shorter than my own. Feeling terrified and at the same time in disbelief, I leave the calf, or whatever it was, to go back to Grain, all the while turning to shine my flashlight on the calf, as though to see if it still had the same appearance. Before I can make it back to the group of adults, Grain stops me, with a look of concern on her face. She stares silently back at me before she says, "You're not supposed to be here." It was supposed to be a secret. Telling her that Uncle Dave had brought me, I then ask what the hell that thing was. "I'm not allowed to tell you," she says. This was supposed to be a secret. 20 or 30 so minutes later, we were all standing around as though waiting for something before the lights of a vehicle pull into the field and a man gets out to come over to us. This man wasn't a farmer. He was some sort of veterinarian. Uncle Dave and the others bring him to tend to the calf's mother, and as he did, me and Grain were made to wait inside one of the men's tractors. We sat inside the tractor for what felt like hours. Even though it was summer, the night was very cold, and I was only wearing a soccer jersey and shorts. I tried prying Grain for more information as to what was going on, but she wouldn't talk about it, or at least wasn't allowed to talk about it. Luckily, my determination for answers got the better of her, because more than an hour later, with nothing but the cold night air and awkward silence to accompany us both, Grain finally gave in. This happens every couple of years, to all the farms here, but we're not supposed to talk about it. It brings bad luck. I then remembered something. When my dad said he wanted us to move here, my mom was dead against it. If anything, she looked scared just considering it. Almost afraid to know the answer, I work up the courage to ask Grain, "Does my mom know about this?" Sat stiffly in the driver's seat, Grain cranes her neck round to me. "Of course she knows," Grain reveals. "Everyone here knows." It made sense now. No wonder my mom didn't want to move here. She never even seemed excited whenever we planned on visiting. which was strange to me because my mom clearly loved her family. I then remembered something else. A couple of years ago, I remember waking up in the middle of the night inside the farmhouse, and I could hear the cows on the farm screaming. The screaming was so bad, I couldn't even get back to sleep that night. The next morning, rushing through my breakfast to go play on the farm, Uncle Dave firmly tells me and my brothers to stay away from the cowshed. He didn't even give an explanation. Later on that night, after what must have been a good 3 hours, my Uncle Dave and the others come over to the tractor. Shaking Uncle Dave's hand, the veterinarian then gets in his vehicle and leaves out the field. I then noticed 2 of the other farmers were carrying a black bag or something, each holding separate ends as they walked. I could see there was something heavy inside, and my first thought was they were carrying the dead calf, or whatever it was, away. Appearing as though everyone was leaving now, Uncle Dave comes over to the tractor to say we're going back to the farmhouse and that we would drop grain home along the way. Having taken grain home, we then make our way back along the country road, where both me and Uncle Dave sat in complete silence. Uncle Dave driving, just staring at the stretch of road in front of us, and me staring silently at him. By the time we get back to the farmhouse, it was 2 o'clock in the morning, and the farm was dead silent. Pulling up outside the farm, Uncle Dave switches off the car engine. Without saying a word, we both remain in silence. I felt too awkward to ask him what I had just seen, but I knew he was waiting for me to do so. Still not saying a word to one another, Uncle Dave turns from the driver's seat to me, and he tells me everything. Grain wouldn't. "Don't you see now why you can't move here?" he says. "There's something wrong with this place, son. This place is cursed. Your mammy knows. She's known since she was a Wayne. That's why she doesn't want you living here." "Why does this happen?" I ask him. "This has been happening for generations, son. For hundreds of years, the animals in the county have been giving birth to these things." The way my Uncle Dave was explaining all this to me, it was almost like a confession, like he had wanted to tell the truth about what's been happening here all his life. It's not just the cows, it's the pigs, the sheep, the horses, and even the dogs. The dogs? It's always the same. They have the head as normal, but the body's always different. It was only now, after a long and terrifying night, that I suddenly started to become emotional. That and I was completely exhausted. Realizing this was all too much for a young boy to handle, I think my Uncle Dave tried to put my mind at ease. "Don't you worry, son. They never live." Although I wanted all the answers, I now felt as though I knew far too much. But there was one more thing I still wanted to know. What do they do with the bodies? "Don't you worry about it, son. Just tell your mammy that you know. But don't go telling your brothers or your daddy now. She never wanted them knowing." By the next morning, and constantly rethinking everything that happened the previous night, I look around the farmhouse for my mom. Thankfully, she was alone in her bedroom folding clothes, and so I took the opportunity to talk to her in private. Entering her room, she asks me how it was seeing a calf being born for the first time. Staring back at her warm smile, my mouth opens to make words, but nothing comes out, and instantly, my mom knows what's happened. "I could kill your Uncle Dave," she says. "He said it was going to be a normal birth." Breaking down in tears right in front of her, my mom comes over to comfort me in her arms. "It's okay, chicken. There's no need to be afraid." After she tried explaining to me what Grain and Uncle Dave had already told me, her comforting demeanor suddenly turned serious. Clasping her hands upon each side of my arms, my mom crouches down, eyes level with me, and with the most serious look on her face I'd ever seen, she demands of me, "Listen, chicken. Whatever you do, don't you dare go telling your brothers or your dad. They can never know. It's going to be our little secret, okay?" Still with tears in my eyes, I nod a silent yes to her. "Good man yourself," she says. We went back home to England a week later. I never told my brothers or my dad the truth of what I saw, of what really happens on those farms, and I refused to ever step foot inside the northwest of Ireland again. But here's the thing. I recently went back to Ireland, years later in my adulthood, and on my travels, I learned my mom and Uncle Dave weren't telling me the whole truth. This curse, it wasn't regional, and sometimes they do live. I moved into my family home. They didn't tell me everything. When I first heard about weird things happening at our cabin, I was maybe 7 years old. Weird things like chickens missing, chickens ending up on the cabin's roof headless, and also goats missing. Our cottage was located in the Appalachian region. There were acres of forest around, and I loved it there. No annoying car sounds, no disturbing bright lights, and lastly, no people. You could be completely alone without anyone bothering you. You could do anything you want without anyone telling you that you can't. It had one big house called the main house, and a smaller building for storage. As a kid, I went there every summer. I wanted to spend even more time there than just a couple of weeks in the summer, but at that time it was not possible. Living there was my biggest dream as a kid. As a teenager, I was, well, you could say disturbed, but I prefer unique. I enjoyed spending time in the forest, and the best time for being there was at night. I loved the forest day and night. I loved animals, living or dead, as death is a part of life. You just have to accept, and that's why people thought that I was disturbed. I wanted to live in our cabin in the woods, all by myself. A couple of years later, I turned 18 and finally was able to move into that cottage. It was awesome. I could walk in the forest anytime I wanted. I had many pets and farm animals. Chickens, goats, 2 cats and a guard dog. I built a coop for the chickens and an enclosure for the goats. I loved it there, until I started hearing these weird noises coming from outside. I kept hearing the scratching sound every night. My dog heard it too, and he usually barked a few times and it stopped. It was weird. There were no signs of scratching when I checked the porch out when it was morning. I was a tiny bit scared. Not much, because I loved the forest around my property, and I was quite sure that it was just some animal trying to come inside the house. One day I was going to feed the animals, and then I saw them, scratch marks, on the garage building's main entrance. They were huge. I had seen scratch marks made by a bear before, but these were different. The door was maybe 2 meters high and 70 centimeters wide. There were 3 scratches made with what looked like a claw or something like that. They were 5 centimeters wide and went from the top of the door to the bottom. At first I thought it was a bear, or that's what I kept telling myself to not freak out. In reality, I knew it couldn't have been a bear. The next night I couldn't fall asleep and I started hearing scratching again. My heart was beating fast and I started to sweat. I was terrified of what was scratching outside. I went and got my gun. I had a shotgun left behind by my grandfather, who loved to hunt. It was old, but I kept it clean and practiced shooting with it. I peeped through my curtains and there was this dark, weird-looking figure standing by the door to my garage. I thought it was a bear and was relieved. But then it turned and looked in my direction. I got spooked and closed the curtains. What I saw couldn't have been a bear. It was tall, over 2 meters tall, standing like a human. It had glowing yellow eyes. That's all I could see before I got spooked. I went to bed shaking. I was grabbing and cuddling the shotgun. I was terrified. I felt like a baby scared of the woods, cuddling a shotgun. What a pussy, I thought. This time my dog didn't bark. Weird. I remember waking up to the sun rising and shining through the curtains. It was morning. I thought, how could I fall asleep? All my animals could be gone, eaten by the thing outside. I quickly rose up, changed my clothes, and went outside to check the animals. All the chickens were there, and they were doing well. Then I checked the goats, and one was missing. They were screaming like hell. They were obviously spooked by something. Then I checked my dog. He was inside with me all night, but I had to check since he usually barks when the scratching is happening, and this time he didn't. There he was smiling and wagging his tail. He seemed normal. Later that day, I found a goat's head impaled by a pine branch. Rest of the goat's body was scattered around my yard, and I found its limbs severed and in different places. All the body parts were chewed. They were torn apart by something and eaten, although not completely. It was weird. I wanted to get the hell out of there, but that was my home, and it had been in my family for ages. I went inside and tried researching the creature online, but nothing. Then I remembered that there was this cabinet in the storage building that I was not allowed to look inside as a kid. My eyes widened as I realized that there must be something that could help. I went inside the storage, and there it was, the cabinet. It looked older than I remembered. The wood was rotting and the cabinet doors almost fell when I opened it. It had these weird objects inside it. They looked like miniature goat heads, small and shrunken down. I got shivers going down my spine as I saw a box that had a goat's head symbol on it and some text, but it was so old that it had worn off. I opened the box and there was a book and a notepad inside. I opened the book and there was a picture of this creature that I had been seeing. There was a text saying, if you see K on this property, you must sacrifice 1 goat to it every week, on Saturdays at 2 a.m. If you don't, it will try to get inside. If it does get inside, it will take you. The name of the creature was worn off. What the fuck? I said out loud, even though I was alone. I read more of the book and there were many pictures of the creature in different places of the yard. There was this page on the creature and it revealed that my family had been seeing the creature for many years. Its name was written in old letters, Kirek. I had thought it was a skinwalker, but I read many stories on skinwalkers, and it definitely was not a skinwalker. It was something else. The notepad contained instructions on how to do the sacrifice, and every sacrifice they had made from 1919 to 2001. That's when I moved in. I had not made any sacrifices as I didn't know about it. I was terrified of making sacrifices to some creature who could easily kill me. I had this thought about, why didn't my family tell me about this? I wanted to get the fuck out, but I didn't because it was my family home. That day very conveniently happened to be Saturday. I had to make the sacrifice. The instructions were clear. I had to take one goat with me to the middle of the woods and leave it on a stone that was placed there by my great-great-grandfather. I had to wait there until Correct took it and went back to the darkness. I had to kneel before it. The instructions said that if you look at Correct taking the goat, it will take you as well. That night I was anxious and was pacing around my house. The clock was around 1:30 as I started preparing. I put on my boots, took my shotgun, and went outside. It was cold, and the wind was howling. It was raining a little, and I went to the goat pen and took one goat with me, the oldest goat I had. I said my goodbyes to the goat, and told him that he was going to be okay. I don't know how I would handle the sacrifice, as this goat was mine for 3 years. I had it before I moved here, but it had to be done. Then I started walking towards the woods. I had seen this spot in the woods before, so I knew where to go. It was pitch black, and all I could hear was the rain and wind. It was so dark out there that I tripped a couple of times on some branches. I reached my destination. I placed the goat there and told him the last goodbyes. Then I took a few steps back, kneeled and waited. I placed my head on the ground. After what felt like 3 hours, I heard stomping and tree branches snapping. It was distant but coming closer. All of a sudden it was so close that the ground was shaking and the tree branches were falling around the area. I started to hear this heavy breathing. I started to shiver. I was petrified. I almost could not breathe. Then I felt a warm breath on my neck and heard Correct sniffing me. Sniff, sniff. Its breath smelt like rotting meat. What the fuck was going on? I thought. Then it let out the scariest earth-shaking and eardrum-piercing scream. Rod. Rod. I heard it picking up the goat and it opened its mouth. I could tell that by the smell that appeared out of nowhere. The smell of rotting flesh. I heard him chew a couple of times and then it came over to me. Correct picked me up. It was strong. It felt like my body would snap in half. I was shaking and started to panic. I opened my eyes and saw its face. It was monstrous. A goat's head with horns that were snapped roughly in half. It had sharp teeth and yellow eyes that were looking directly in my soul. I screamed. I started to wiggle and then I fell to the ground. It screamed. I started to run back to the house. As I ran, I looked back and Kirik was just standing at the site of the sacrifice. Then it started running towards me. I ran for my life. I tripped a couple of times but got back up. It was a life or death situation. I tripped once more and I broke my ankle when I fell and it hurt like hell. It felt like I couldn't run anymore, but I had to. I was exhausted and ready to give up. But finally I reached my house, got in and locked the door. Then I went and grabbed my shotgun and looked out the window. Kirik was standing outside at the edge of the woods. I couldn't see him properly, but the outline was there. I decided that it was time to go. I started packing, and when I was ready, it was already morning. I packed my bags in the truck, took all the animals that could fit in the truck and said goodbyes to the property. I couldn't handle this anymore, as I was saying goodbyes to the property. I found a goat's head sitting in front of the garage. I took it as a warning that I had forgotten to make the sacrifices for it, a warning that said you're next. I went to my truck and drove off. I couldn't stop thinking about last night, and as I turned to the road that took me away from there, I saw a goat that was placed on a tree branch. It was impaled by the branch, and it was definitely placed there by Kirik. I felt horrible as I thought, can I even escape? It was clearly following me, and that full body of a goat impaled by a tree. This definitely meant that I was next. I'm a psychologist. A part of my client just escaped. I was returning with the coffee my client requested when he burst out of the room, nearly knocking me over. I leapt to one side, miraculously keeping the coffee from spilling. He charged straight toward the exit. Damn it, drama like this kept happening whenever my receptionist wasn't around to help. I swiftly placed the coffee on the nearest surface and ran after him. Julius. Asterisk, not his real name. He was emanating rage so tangible I could almost see it smoking off his back. He yanked the clinic door open and sprinted off. I gave chase to the lift, but the lift door closed in my face. I contemplated running down the stairs, but doubted I could reach him in time. So I returned to the clinic, hurried towards my office. I needed to call his emergency contact to try to keep him safe. I opened the door and came to an abrupt stop. Julius was still seated in my office. He seemed calm, collected, with no trace of the rage he was emanating just a few moments before. What? I stared blankly at Julius. Then at the exit I just saw him leave from. You've a twin? I was grasping at straws. I hadn't seen anyone else enter my office. But then again, a twin could have snuck in while I was making the coffee. No, that was... Julius hesitated. Then he sighed. I think you should take a seat, he said. Was I in a movie? Weren't those words typically said by the police or doctors to people before they delivered bad news? I took a seat anyway. Remember when we were talking about parts? I nodded. We had been discussing the different parts that each of us have, different parts of our minds that form who we are. There are protective parts, angry parts, insecure parts, and so on. Well, I talked about how I had an angry, aggressive part who would sometimes take over, and whenever that part of me took over, I would lose control, he continued. I nodded again, and we talked about you having a conversation with that part of you to better understand that part's role, beliefs, and so on, I added. What about it? Well, while you were making coffee, I talked to it, told that angry part of myself that it had to go. That wasn't part of the plan. The goal of our therapy sessions wasn't to get rid of any parts. It was to get to understand each part's perspectives and experiences, to eventually integrate them. I was tempted to mention that, but that was not the issue at hand. Wait, okay, and? I asked. I had a feeling I knew Julius' answer. And so he left. That was him. That stormed out. So, a part of you just took shape, took on a physical form and stormed out. Is that what you're saying? Julius nodded and my heart sank. He was either hallucinating, deluded, playing a prank on me, or maybe I was hallucinating. Maybe we both were hallucinating. I did see a Julius storm out while this Julius sat right here in my office. Hey Julius, I know it's still April, but if this is some April's Fool prank, I must say, it's not. Julius cut in curtly. When you talked about parts, I thought you understood. Understood what? My condition, my situation, that I have different parts of myself, and that they have their own lives and bodies. I bit my lip. I considered pressing the emergency button. I stared him dead in his eyes, and saw the shining conviction in them. Cold sweat prickled at my neck. Parts therapy is just a form of therapy. It's just a therapy that takes into account the multifaceted nature of our mind. It addresses the many sides to our personality and self. I definitely did not mean actual separate people. But in my case, that's just what it is. If what you're saying is true, it is true. Julius let out a frustrated sigh. Watch this. Hey Mopey, he said. Mopey was his nickname for the sad, depressive part of himself. Mopey, get out of my body now, please. Just show her. She's got to know you exist. Please. You have to make her believe me. Nothing happened. I smiled gently, trying to wipe any trace of awkwardness from the situation. Hey Julius. It's okay. Everything's... Shut up, he's coming out, Julius snapped. I stifled a sigh, then blinked, and rubbed my eyes. Blinked again. Julius was splitting into two, right in front of my eyes. For a heart-stopping moment, he resembled a pair of Siamese twins, with two heads, 4 arms stuck to one lower half. Nausea roiled in my stomach, then a pair of legs stepped out from the existing pair of legs. What the fuck? I yelled. My first swear word in front of this client, or rather, these clients. I stared at the two men staring back at me. The Julius that had stepped out from the other Julius looked exactly like him, but his shoulders were hunched, facial features pulled down in a look of abject misery, and he stood as if about to collapse from exhaustion. All right, come back in, Julius 1 said to Julius 2. Julius 2 paused for a long moment, looking down at the ground. Then, before my horrified fascination, he slowly lifted one foot, then the other, and trudged back into Julius 1. I slumped back in my seat. Holy, son of a mother, what's going on? I've lived like that all my life. I have different parts of me. Sometimes they take over what I call my main body, and I'm out of control. Other times they simply step right out and do whatever the hell they want. Julius breathed out a long sigh. It's such a relief finally telling someone about this. You have no idea the crazy shit, the lengths I've had to go to hide their existence. Existence CES, he corrected himself. So, yeah, I said, my brain trying to make sense of it all. I wanted to run, to slap myself awake. I tried to rationalize what just happened. I couldn't find any explanation. Enough had happened in my life for me to know that the world wasn't always as it seemed. Stranger things have happened in life. So, you have parts that can leave your body and walk away in physical forms. How does that even work? I mean, matter isn't lost or created, right? How did you get enough flesh to form another body? And does your brain multiply too? I have no idea. Never tried to find out. Don't want to end up in a lab. Julius' brows knitted, and a sly, cruel smirk seized his mouth. And if you ever try to tell anyone, I'll kill you. My eyes widened. I stood up, ready to run. Julius' face softened. Sorry, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean that. That was Darius. Darius was the name Julius gave to what he called his murderous part. It was similar to his angry part in that both were based on rage. But while his angry part liked to yell and throw tantrums, Darius, on the other hand, was cool-headed. He liked to take his time creating meticulous, intricate plans involving murdering those who displeased him. It was one thing being told such things when you assumed someone was talking about a part of themselves, a dark side of their personality. It's another when you realize they're talking about an actual being that could step right out of them and rip your throat out. Tell Darius that, well, I won't tell anyone about this condition, but if he keeps threatening me, well, then confidentiality is moot, and Julius snarled and a head leapt out of his head. For a stomach-turning moment, he had two heads, one with a cold, twisted smile, and another that was contorted in fear. The fearful-looking face shut its eyes and grit its teeth. Then the second head got sucked back in, and they merged with an uncomfortably wet plop. I'm so sorry. I'll try to keep him under control, Julius said. I choked down the nausea that arose. I should have quit. I should have quit for good. Never should have come back. I should have just traveled the world, doing odd jobs or something to survive. Why the hell did I come back to be a psychologist? You can't hurt her, Julius hissed. I assumed he was talking to Darius. I shut my eyes and let resignation wash over me. Then I opened my eyes and calmly sat down again. I see, I said. I had reached my breaking point. Just like the past times when I had reached this point, something in me just shut down. The fear morphed into a heavy resignation. My shoulders slumped. So, now we got to get the angry you back, right? I asked. Have they ever escaped like that? No, I've never told them to leave. But they have come out at inopportune times. Usually they know better than to come out with witnesses around. And they definitely have never appeared in front of more than one person, much less charged out into the streets. So others have witnessed this before. Yes, but they tend to think that they're losing it, you know? Especially since no one else was around. I insisted nothing had happened. Okay. Well, welp. Okay. I just sat there, mind grinding to a halt. We've got to get Darren back, Julius said. Darren was the name he gave to his angry part. What's this wee business, was what I wanted to say. But instead I went, yes, we've got to get him back. Then work on integrating these different parts of you, not getting rid of any of them, so that you can, well, not have people jumping out of you. Julius frowned. I came here to get rid of them. I don't want to be sad, or angry, or murderous, or insecure. I want to just be happy, at peace. Nope, I said, all my psychologist decorum gone. Not possible, not healthy. Not a single soul on earth can claim to only ever be happy and at peace. Nope. Emotions are important. Each part of us serves a purpose, exists for a reason, blah blah. The healthy thing to do is to help all parts live together in harmony, integrating into an adaptive whole. So, you want the murderous part of me staying in my personality? Julius asked. I shrugged. It's scary, but many people have murderous parts. Our other parts usually help keep them in check. Julius looked like he was about to argue. Then his eyes lit up. I know where Darren will be. He pulled out his phone and began typing feverishly. He likes to go to this rage room when he's angry. He likes to smash things. Well, if you go there, what's people gonna say about there being two of you? Twins, of course, like you said. And triplets if another of you emerges. Julius grinned. I frowned. He seemed to be enjoying this just a little too much. "Please help me get him back," he added, looking pleadingly at me. I considered terminating our therapy on the spot and going home to take a nice long bath. Then I sighed. I'm charging by the hour. A very long story short, after a lot of bargaining, pleading, tears and whatnot, Julius got Darren back. I honestly thought that I had a chance at having normal therapy sessions with Julius after that I could just ignore the fact that his parts could take on physical bodies. By the next day, I knew I was wrong. Julius showed up at my office, though he was booked in for next week. "He's gone," was the first thing he said. "Who?" I asked, dread pooling in my gut. "Darius." Of course the one to escape and go MIE would be the worst possible one to do so, the murderous one. Do you know why? He said he needed to be free, that he didn't want to be integrated. He wanted to stay his own person. He didn't want to be tethered to me anymore. Julius shut his eyes. "I think he wants to kill people." "And why didn't he start with you?" I asked, not being cruel, just curious. He shrugged. "Maybe he's afraid that if I'm gone, he will be too." Okay. We were silent for a while. "Any idea who hell go after first?" "You." "Of course. Of fucking course." I didn't even do shit to him. I protested anyway. I didn't care if I was being unprofessional. This situation was way out of my depth. Can I just terminate our therapy and be done with him too? I know, I wasn't being kind, but I've been through a lot in my life. Too much for me to want to put up with more of this stuff. Julius smiled sadly. I wish it were that easy. A chill ran down my spine at the way he said that. "You know something about his plans?" "He has many. I've seen his mind. He has mapped out 47 possible ways of killing you, and about as many for all the different people he's thought about killing." "Murdering," I corrected. "Murdering," Julius agreed. "I'm going to the police," I said. And saying what? I trailed off. What the hell could I say? If I mentioned Julius at all, this Julius would be locked up. The murderous one would still be free. And how was I going to explain any of this stuff to the police? "I'm going overseas," I said with a firm nod. Julius' eyes lit up. "That would work. I have my passport. He has none. He can leave the country." My heart lifted. For the first time, there was a very simple solution to my problems, and it was an attractive solution. I got to go on vacation while avoiding a murdering asshole. "What country does he hate?" I asked, just in case. "I don't know, anywhere without fancy hotels, I guess. I know his preferences." Okay, see you. I'm booking a flight to wait, I'm not gonna tell you. Just in case, you know. "I know," Julius said. He paused. "I'm sorry I roped you into this. I'll try to get him back, so you can come home." Sure, I said, distractedly. I was already booking my first flight. I would take a few connecting flights, just to make sure it was harder to be tracked. Who knew, maybe that Julius would steal the passport. Oh shit. "Hey, do me a favor, get back home right now. Grab your passport, lock it somewhere Darius wouldn't be able to access. Okay?" Anxiety filled Julius' face as he realized what I was worried about. "Yes," he said, and turned to leave. "Goodbye and sorry," he said again, at the door. "Not your fault." "Not really," I said. "Well, all that happened 2 months ago. For 2 months I was basking in nature, far, far away from my country. But I just flew home yesterday." Julius had texted, told me he had found Darius, convinced him to rejoin him in the same body. I could finally come home, but, well, I didn't really look forward to it. It was fun, vacationing indefinitely, but I needed to work, and my clients were waiting. I just unpacked and loaded up the laundry, and already I'm thinking about future therapy sessions with Julius. Okay, there's the doorbell. I think my pizza's here. Okay, shit. First of all, shit. It wasn't pizza, it was Julius. He said he wanted to check on me, see how I am, that he had an important thing to share with me, that it couldn't wait for office hours. But I never told Julius my home address. How the hell did he find me? And he seemed off, like he had plastered on a hollow smile that could fall off any moment. I didn't open the door, of course, but he's still there. He's not calling out my name anymore, but when I checked the peephole 5 minutes ago, he was still outside, smiling emptily. Jim creeped out. Maybe I should call the cops. It'll give it 10 more minutes. If he doesn't leave, I'll call the cops. Okay, what the hell just happened? The pizza guy came, the actual pizza guy. I couldn't open the door. Julius was still outside, but I needed to tip the delivery guy, get my pizza. I yelled at him to leave it at the door. Julius took the pizza from him and said something to him that I couldn't make out through the peephole. The pizza guy reared his head back as if attacked, then turned and walked rapidly away. Whatever Julius said had really freaked him out. "Hey, this is unacceptable," I called out. "I'm calling the cops." "Go ahead," Julius said, in a cold, cocky tone. "Do that. You'll see what happens to Kayla. And Julie. And your parents. All fake names. I need to protect them." He then proceeded to read out their addresses. "Oh," he added after, "I think Kayla's about to head out to walk Puffy." My breath caught in my throat. Was he monitoring them? Did he have surveillance cameras? I pulled up Kayla's contact, ready to call her. "Warn them, and they die," Julius announced cheerfully. It was like he could read my mind. I didn't know what to do. Every cell in my body tingled. I felt an irrational urge to fling the door open and strangle that smirk off his face. I wanted to call the police, but I couldn't be sure Julius couldn't get to my best friends, to my parents, before help arrived. What if? What if his other parts were out, working for him? "I'm not opening the door," I yelled. "If you say so," Julius mocked in an oily, knowing tone. I strode to my bedroom and slammed the door shut. I need to warn them, that's for sure. How could I do so, warn my friends and parents, without him knowing? How was he keeping track of them? I should have made up emergency code words, or signals with them. I had thought about that after watching one too many horror movies, but hadn't actually gotten around to that. I saw the text from my receptionist then. "Hey, I gave the police your number. They will be calling you soon. I'm sorry, it's bad news. Your client Julius was found dead in his home, and his entire family was dead. They think he might have pulled a murder-suicide." I felt the blood drain from my face. My legs gave way and I collapsed to the ground. I stayed there like a puddle of bones and flesh for a long time. Julius was dead. His entire family was dead. Then this was Darius. I had suspected that, but I didn't expect him to really kill off Julius and the entire family. My stomach twisted painfully, and all I could hear was the sound of my heart thudding away. Julius. I hadn't helped him. I had fled overseas, left him to deal with his murderous part all on his own. Now he was dead. Fuck. I had caused his death. His family's death. Indirectly, but still. His blood was on my hands too. I took in a few deep, slow breaths to calm my hammering heart. Then I crafted a message to my best friends and my parents. I mean extreme danger from an unstable, dangerous client. You are too. He threatened to kill you. He's monitoring you right now. In real time. I'm calling the police soon. But he will try to go after you. He may send others after you. The moment you see this message, get yourself somewhere safe. Call the police. Get all the help you can. I love you. I'll deal with this, and I'll explain more when this is all over. Stay safe. I hesitated. I wasn't ready to send it out. I grabbed the kitchen knife, wrapped duct tape around the handle, and tried the grip. The duct tape provided better resistance. I read somewhere that many people got cut when they tried to stab others because their hands slipped. The duct tape surface ought to help with that. I locked my bedroom door, went into the bathroom and locked that door too. Then I sat down to complete this post. Because, well, if I die, I want everyone to know what happened to me, the real story. I picked up the phone to dial the cops, and Darius hollered from the doorway, "Don't do it. Once you do, you're done. I will kill you, and everyone you love." I thought for a moment that my neighbors may come to my rescue. He was loud, but then I remembered. They are overseas. Okay, I just sent out the message. I'm calling the cops now. Wish me luck. That's it for tonight's stories, but the nightmares never end. If you enjoyed these chilling tales, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a new upload. Got a scary experience of your own? Share it in the comments. I just might feature it in a future video. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember some things are scarier than they seem in the dark.